Chapter 829. Evildoer. Jiang Pingji's gaze shifted and she secretly clenched her right hand. Her tone was filled with murderous intent. I heard my father mention that evildoer. It was said that she was the culprit behind my mother's death. However, she was omnipotent and had extraordinary abilities. My father couldn't do anything to her. Xie Qian had been observing Jiang Pingji's reaction. Seeing her reaction, he knew that she knew a lot of inside information. Lu Shi was a big-hearted person. He told such an important matter to his child. Wasn't he afraid that his child would do something stupid out of impulse? Xie Qian did not tell Li Yun the truth about his mother's death. He was actually afraid that his child would do something stupid out of impulse. That evildoer was not simple. Even the master said, an ordinary human body could not hurt the evildoer at all. To put it bluntly, going there would be suicide. Rather than saying that she has omnipotent abilities, it's better to say that the person she hooked up with is powerful. Xie Qian sneered mockingly. His eyes were filled with obvious disgust and contempt. He continued, perhaps no one in the world can compare to her in terms of seducing the master. Jiang Pingji nodded in agreement. She smiled and said, since ancient times, heroes have a weakness for the charms of beauties. Even heroes among men are like this, let alone those ordinary people who are controlled by their bodies. I'm just a little curious. My father said that the evildoer has evil methods that are beyond imagination. She is comparable to Daji, who seduces the master. Why didn't any master teach her a lesson? From the information obtained so far, it was known that there were no immortal techniques in this world, but there were methods beyond imagination. For example, Monk Liaochen of the Hejin Buddhist temple. He could read one's face and know one's fate. Xie Qian frowned. Jiang Pingji's question was one that he could not understand. All these years, I have secretly visited many hermits and masters. I know some inside information. Xie Qian said, that year, when I found out that my wife's body was possessed by this evildoer, I immediately thought of the ancient fox demon who possessed Su Daji. Before that, I didn't believe in deceiving gods. But facing my wife who was completely unfamiliar, I had to believe in her. I had no choice but to secretly seek help from a master. Xie Qian sought help from Monk Liaochen of Hejin. Unfortunately, the news was leaked and the evildoer was alarmed. I heard father say that you're looking for Master Liaochen. Xie Qian nodded with a bitter smile, yes, Master Liaochen. Unfortunately, before he could even see Master Liaochen, the evildoer had already discovered his intentions. The evildoer took the opportunity to ambush him and heavily injured him. Later, he encountered bandits who wanted to kill him. Xie Qian had no choice but to risk his life and jump off the cliff with his infant son. Fortunately, he won the bet, and the vines and branches on the cliff side saved his and his son's lives. Jiang Pingji's streaming room was still open. When Xie Qian first appeared, many viewers expressed that the uncle was really charming. Everyone was silently praising the uncle's looks. When they heard the conversation between the two, the bullet screen on the live broadcast screen changed in unison. Atlantis, does old handsome Xie Qian mean that he found out that his wife has been transmigrated? You are amazing, my ancient people. Yizhan Mingming, that's normal, right? After all, they were partners sharing the same bed. How could he not notice? Yan Rian, I'm a little confused. Who can explain what's going on? Zishou Chouzhou, do you remember that there's a transmigrator in the host's world? According to the content of the previous live broadcast, this transmigrator took over Xie Qian's wife's body and was later discovered by Xie Qian. The transmigrator took the initiative to kill Xie Qian's infant son, Han Mei. Xie Qian and his son were lucky enough to survive. Of course, they would think of a way to take revenge. Kumo lemonade, this. Transmigrating isn't something that the person can control, right? But that transmigrator is really too much. Not only did she take over the body of someone else's wife, she also wanted to kill the husband and son of this body. But Xie Qian also wanted to kill the transmigrator. If I were a transmigrator, I'd rather live than die. Even though I feel guilty, everyone wants to live, right? Liangpin Puzi, I don't think this matter can be put into the same category. Everyone wants to live, but what the transmigrator did was really too much. According to what we know, not only did this transmigrator want to kill Xie Qian and his son, but she also killed the host's mother and her first two brothers. Remember Lu Huan, the illegitimate daughter of the Lu family? According to the analysis of the gods, Lu Huan is the daughter of the transmigrator and Prince Changshu. Remember Lu Huan's husband, Wuma Jun is the son of the transmigrator and the emperor of Dongqing. Most importantly, these two half-siblings were born from Xie Qian's wife, Wang Huiyin's body. No one would be able to accept such a thing, right? The bullet screen discussed intensely. Many of the audience thought of the transmigrator who tried to assassinate Jiang Pingji and shuddered. From the perspective of Xie Qian and the original body, Wang Huiyun, the transmigrator took over someone else's body and used it to try to kill the original body's beloved husband and son. She also used this body to entangle with countless men and gave birth to two bastards. Who wouldn't feel disgusted? Xie Qian didn't know that the audience was discussing this matter. He said, I originally wanted to seek help from Master Liaochen, but the demon was too powerful and saw through my plan. Later, I met another expert by chance. He told me that the demon had an extraordinary background. I'm afraid he's from another world and can disturb the predetermined fate. He also said that many experts have noticed something strange, but the demon has strange supernatural powers and is good at hiding his whereabouts. If he hasn't matured, we can try. But so many years have passed and he has matured. It's hard to get rid of him. The experts in this world were just more powerful charlatans. They could pinch and calculate, but they couldn't fight. The transmigrator's fate was not in this world. They couldn't calculate the person's fate, let alone find her. Someone from another world. Xie Qian sighed. Yes, someone from another world might be a demon that harms people. Jiang Pingji rolled her eyes and found something strange. Lu Shi knew the general location of the transmigrator because he had power and influence. He could send people to help him investigate. Xie Qian was a loner, powerless, and removed from the Xie family. How could he be so sure that the transmigrator was in the Zhongzhou palace? I have a question. How did you know that the demon was in the Zhongzhou palace? Did an expert tell you that? The expert didn't tell me, but he gave me this. Xie Qian took something out of his pocket. It was a jade pendant in the shape of a yin-yang fish. Jiang Pingji stepped forward to take it. It was the size of a palm and felt warm to the touch. The texture was smooth and delicate. It was a rare warm jade. The jade pendant was very strange. It was half black and half white. The black was pure and the white was translucent. What is this? Chapter 830. The Prime Minister of the previous dynasty, Huang Fushou. Jiang Pingji had read about him in the history books. It was rumored that he was proficient in the 8 trigrams of the Book of Changes. He had the heavenly eye and could communicate with ghosts and gods. At first, she thought that he was not doing his job properly. Instead of ruling the country and fighting wars, he pretended to be a quack. But now, it seemed that the rumors were true. Otherwise, why would there be such a strange thing among his burial items? Look. Other than its strange shape, this warm jade has no other uses. Jiang Pingji murmured. Xie Qian explained, the master said that this item can ward off evil spirits and stabilize the soul. It specializes in restraining demons and ghosts, and it has another magical power. Jiang Pingji curiously looked at the jade pendant, but she did not find anything strange. What magical power? Xie Qian said, it is said that there is another universe in the jade pendant. It is difficult for demons to hide from it. It is a Taoist treasure. Jiang Pingji stared at Xie Qian, blinked, and said, can you explain it more clearly? No matter how one looked at it, it was just an ordinary jade pendant. Xie Qian smiled bitterly and said, wear the jade by your side when you sleep. After a long time, the spiritual jade will connect with your soul. When you sleep, you can travel freely between heaven and earth, dream of many strange scenes, and remember them clearly when you wake up. The master told me that as long as I drip the target's blood on the center of the yin-yang fish, I can see the target's location when I enter the dream. Jiang Pingji was stunned. She said, that's amazing. There is such a thing in the world. The 150,000 idle viewers kept sending 666. The streaming room was finally developing from ancient times to Xianxia. You use this to find the demon's location? Jiang Pingji asked. It was simply a Xianxia version of the GPS. Xie Qian smiled bitterly. How can it be so simple? It took me several years to find the general location of the other party. Once the distance is too close to the demon, this thing loses its effect. I think it must be the demon's invisibility ability. Therefore, this thing could only lock the general location, but it could not accurately locate the target. Jiang Pingji looked at the yin-yang jade pendant thoughtfully. She felt that the characteristics of this thing were somewhat familiar. On the other side, the idle spectators in the live stream were also envious. Yuan Xiaoyo, Hanmei's dad, said that the jade pendant has a different dimension. Does that mean it's a portable space? Duanlu, host, do you want to bite your finger and bleed to try it? Perhaps it would successfully recognize its master. Moyin Sang Yuan, maybe it's not just a dimensional pocket. There's also a magical spring that can cleanse one's bones. The stars of last night, maybe there's not only a magical spiritual spring, but also an even more magical spiritual field. We can have fun on a farm. Suifeng Xiaoxi, ha ha ha, maybe there is not only a spiritual field, but also a small farmhouse with countless cultivation methods. Autumn water, in order not to break the formation, let me say this too. Maybe there's not only a farmhouse, but also an old grandpa. Jiang Pingji was speechless. Salted fish were indeed salted fish. They were a bunch of people who didn't mind stirring up trouble. She ignored the idle audience and asked Xie Qian, how do I use it? Just wear it by your side every day. Xie Qian said, an expert once said that if a person with a strong soul is born with the ability to communicate with the spiritual jade, their dreams will be clearer. If it's an ordinary person, they can only increase the amount of time they have contact with the spiritual jade. After constant practice, they can enter the dream and communicate with the spirit. It all depends on the person's talent. Jiang Pingji looked at the jade pendant in her hand and frowned. She had a feeling that she had seen this thing before. Xie Qian also noticed Jiang Pingji's strangeness. He asked casually, what did you find? Jiang Pingji said, can you lend this treasure to me for a while? I don't know why, but when I see it, I have an illusion that it looks familiar, as if I've seen it somewhere before. But I can't remember at the moment. I wonder if you can agree to it. For Xie Qian, this jade pendant was his lifeblood. If he lost it, he would never be able to find the demon's whereabouts, let alone seek revenge. But during the previous assassination, he realized that he was just a mortal. There was no way he could compete with the demon. He needed the power of a mortal. If not for that, Xie Qian would not have brought Wan Xian all the way to Wanzhou. If Jiang Pingji wanted to lend it to him, he naturally would not refuse. Xie Qian nodded in agreement. Jiang Pingji hurriedly said, I'll borrow it for 2 days. I'll definitely return it after some time. After that, Xie Qian mentioned Li Yun and Sheng Wanwan's marriage. His son was not young anymore. It was not easy for him to win over a cabbage. As a father, he had to assist him. With Li Yun's current awkward status, it was great luck to be able to marry Sheng Wanwan, the daughter of a noble family. I have no opinion on this matter. The key is Wan Er's attitude. You should have heard from Han Mei about Wan Er's past. It wasn't her fault. In all fairness, Wan Er and Han Mei are a good match. The two of them love each other. It would be best if they could get married. In front of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women, a good woman should not marry a second time. Even if a woman's husband died before she married, a woman should be widowed for a husband she had never met. Xie Qian was not so pedantic. In fact, he scoffed at most of the contents of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. Not to mention second marriages, there were many women who married 2 or 3 times among the gentry. They only looked at the match and bloodline. They did not care about anything else. In fact, Sheng Wanwan's status as a widow was nothing to Xie Qian. What kind of past is that? Why are those idiots making a fuss about being a widow? Why don't they take a look at themselves? Xie Qian's eyes were full of disdain. If you say so, I feel more at ease. When Xie Qian came out of the district headquarters, he saw his son looking around from afar. He looked as stupid as he could be. Father, Xie Qian pretended not to know him and walked past his son. Li Yun was depressed. He only wanted to know if the Lord had agreed to his marriage with Wan Er. In another room, Jiang Pingji was lost in thought as she looked at the yin-yang jade pendant on the table. She searched her memory seriously. Based on her experience, it was impossible for her to have seen such an item, but the sense of familiarity lingered. Jiang Pingji held the jade pendant and closed her eyes in deep thought. She wanted to use her mental energy to explore the material of the jade pendant. It was at this moment that an invisible cyclone appeared on the surface of the jade pendant. A weak suction attracted her attention. She closed her eyes and calmed her mind. She took the opportunity to inject her mental energy into the pendant. Suddenly, the originally dark field of vision suddenly brightened. It was the high sky covered by clouds and mist. She was stunned for a moment. She realized that a red line extended all the way to the bottom of the clouds. With a thought, she felt an illusion of weightlessness. Her line of sight followed the red line and pulled closer to the ground. Seeing that she was about to hit the ground, she suddenly opened her eyes. The feeling of weightlessness suddenly disappeared. Chapter 831. After the high-altitude scene, Jiang Pingji could see that the audience in the streaming room was still confused. From their point of view, Jiang Pingji was holding the yin-yang jade pendant. Her expression was slightly relaxed. After a while, she opened her eyes and muttered something, "It's this thing." What on earth was it? She didn't know what was going on. The 150,000 idle viewers felt their curiosity was piqued, but the bad streamer refused to answer their questions. She was going to kill those with obsessive-compulsive disorder. Before Jiang Pingji could sort out her thoughts, some of the viewers couldn't help but ask questions. The entire screen was filled with all kinds of greetings. "Guanyu, I'm so anxious. Can't you just say everything in one go? It's so uncomfortable to leave half of it unsaid." "Zuixian, streamer, what's the origin of this jade pendant? Is it possible that there's a portable space, a spiritual spring, a spiritual field, a farmhouse, and a portable grandpa? If there's really such a thing, streamer, you might as well stop streaming conquering the world and start streaming cultivation. Someday Dao Zaishan, ha ha ha, that's a good suggestion. If there's a streaming of cultivation, I want to be the streamer's first disciple. Even if I'm not an inner disciple or a personal disciple, it's good for me to be a registered disciple. Cultivation is much better than conquering the world. Sha Jiutian Duanjiang Go, Tisk, why are you guys so optimistic? If this streaming room stops streaming the dukedom and changes to a streaming of cultivation, do you think it's possible for you guys to squeeze into the streaming room? Maybe everyone in the world will run to the signal tower and live there. When that time comes, with the hand speed of you guys who have been single for more than 20 years, do you think you can get a spot in the streaming room? You're thinking too much. Shiyu Sichin, getting a spot in the streaming room is a small matter. I'm afraid that after the streamer changes to cultivation, everyone on Earth will go there. 150,000 idle spectators gathered together, and they could easily lead the topic astray. At first, they were eager to know the origin of the yin-yang jade pendant, but now they were thinking about how to cultivate in the future. When Jiang Pingji sorted out her thoughts, the viewers were talking about how many years they could live freely and happily after cultivating. Jiang Pingji was speechless. She sent a bullet screen to cut off their daydreams so that they wouldn't be able to stop thinking. Host V, you guys are thinking too much. Your divergent thinking is not bad, but it's a pity that only a few of your sentences are relevant. Rather than calling this item a jade pendant, it would be more accurate to call it a type of interstellar ore. Even in my previous world, it was extremely rare and precious. When Jiang Pingji revealed the answer, the audience was in an uproar, then they were deeply disappointed. They had thought that they could cultivate and didn't expect such an answer. Drunken Cloud Cat Demon, disappointed. He was exceptionally disappointed. If it was just a piece of ore, it would be meaningless. Regardless of whether it was ancient times, modern times, or the interstellar era, they were all essentially the same dimensional world. The only difference between the three was the time axis. If they were to vigorously promote the development of science and technology, even the most backward era would enter the interstellar era. This was the inevitable outcome of the development of science and technology. The ores on Earth would be considered interstellar ores on other planets, wouldn't they? If that's the case, there's nothing special about the yin-yang jade pendant in the host's hand. Many of the audience expressed their disappointment, but a small number of people noticed the details of Jiang Pingji's words. She said that this interstellar ore was extremely rare even in her world. This was thought-provoking. In the interstellar era, there were tens of thousands of habitable planets. What they lacked the least was all kinds of energy. Under such circumstances, for Jiang Pingji to describe it as rare and precious, it was definitely a priceless treasure. Many people thought of this, and their extinguished curiosity was rekindled. Fried Egg Ching, streamer, what special use does this interstellar ore have? Jiang Pingji flipped the yin-yang jade pendant left and right, a light smile on her face. Because there was no one around, Jiang Pingji wasn't afraid of being heard. She opened her mouth and said, "Special use, I'm afraid I'll scare you if I tell you." According to the records of the Interstellar Federation, a new intelligent race will be discovered every 7 interstellar days. There are many forms of intelligent races. The most common creatures are those that are made up of cells, and the rarest are those that are pure energy bodies or spiritual bodies. Regardless of whether they are pure energy bodies or spiritual bodies, their life structure is not stable. Most of them can only survive in a specific environment. A small number of them can rely on special substances or mediums to leave their original ecological environment. This special substance is the ore in my hand. Can you guess its value? Jiang Pingji rarely talked about her past, so naturally, the audience didn't want to miss it. Awesome Wadigu, streamer, don't keep us in suspense, I'm dying of anxiety. Tian show ba. How much value can such a small thing have? Is it possible to buy an entire Earth? Some of the audience couldn't wait to urge her, while others laughed and teased her. Jiang Pingji laughed and said, an ore the size of a fingernail can buy one or even several ore planets. Do you think it's valuable? This thing is the most important cornerstone of the central hub of the Sky Brain. With it, the Sky Brain network can be realized in a real sense. You won't understand even if I tell you all this, you just need to know that it's very powerful. Unfortunately, it's a waste of God's gift now. Such a powerful thing, if it was placed in the right era, could be used to its greatest potential and create endless wealth. But now, it can only be treated as an ordinary accessory. Jiang Pingji was once one of the people with the highest authority in the Federation. In other words, her authority in the Sky Brain was second only to the Commander-in-Chief of the Federation. Many highly classified information that ordinary people couldn't come into contact with was completely open to her. She had interacted with the Sky Brain before, so she knew that the Sky Brain wasn't complicated data, but a living body. To be precise, the Sky Brain should be a virtual creature that was a combination of pure energy and spirit. This was very similar to a creature like the system. Speaking of which, it was strange. Even the Sky Brain couldn't completely leave its host, so how did the system do it? Was it purely dependent on the host? But the host was just an ordinary human. In theory, it wasn't enough to become the host of a virtual creature. Jiang Pingji touched the yin-yang jade pendant in her hand, her expression revealing some suspicion. But very quickly, she threw this question to the back of her mind. At that moment, the Livestream room had already exploded. Such a small thing was worth who knew how many Earths. Was she kidding them? Why would Jiang Pingji have the leisure to tease them? Chapter 832. Catch a rat. Catch what rat? The audience was confused. Did a rat break into the streamer's room and eat her supper? Jiang Pingji didn't explain further. She put away the yin-yang jade pendant and, for the first time, asked for leave from the audience and turned off the stream. It was not convenient for the audience to see what happened next. After that, Jiang Pingji found a quiet place and poked the system. I know you're still alive. Don't play dead. You saw what happened just now. Is there anything you want to say? After Jiang Pingji finished speaking, she didn't hear anything else. If she wasn't sure that the system was still locked up, she might have suspected that the system had run away. Squeak if you don't want to die. We're already at this point. What else can you do? With the appearance of the yin-yang jade pendant, Jiang Pingji had more information on the system. Jiang Pingji said bluntly. The system could only speak unwillingly. Squeak. Faced with the system's malicious act of cuteness, Jiang Pingji curled her lips and said, I'll give you half an hour to be honest. The system snorted fiercely and said with disdain, what honesty? You're still too young to fool me. Ever since they parted on bad terms, the system and Jiang Pingji hadn't talked anymore. The system knew that every time Jiang Pingji looked for it, nothing good would come out of it. It must have had 8 lifetimes of bad luck to have met such a host. Can you tell me where your core carrier is? Jiang Pingji asked it with a smile. Her tone was casual, as if she was just asking about the weather. The system secretly spat on the inside, but it said, aren't you my host? Don't play dumb. You know what core carrier I'm talking about. Jiang Pingji changed her style of communication when she realized that harmonious communication wasn't possible. After seeing the yin-yang jade pendant, I remembered that you're a system and a virtual being. Logically speaking, virtual beings can't leave their original environment without a special carrier. Even the Sky Brain can't avoid this. You're the same. Hearing Jiang Pingji compare it to the Sky Brain, the system almost exploded in anger. Major General, I don't have that kind of thing at all. You should just give up. It was a system that had the ability to travel between different planes. It was a true high-level life form. How could a mere heavenly brain compare to it? Jiang Pingji saw that the system refused to pay up. She sneered and asked, "You don't feel guilty for saying that?" The system's heart skipped a beat. On the surface, it still stuck to its original words and refused to be coaxed by Jiang Pingji. Fine, 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 since you insist on not having a carrier core, I won't force you. But I have a question that I'm very curious about. I don't know if you can answer it. How do you shoot live broadcasts? Or rather, where was the camera used for the live stream? I have carefully observed the camera angle of the live broadcast room. With my position as the standard, there are no blind spots hundreds of meters in the air. But no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find anything like a camera. I thought about this problem for a long time, but I still couldn't figure out the principle behind your live broadcast. Until today, when I found this thing, it gave me inspiration. Jiang Pingji tossed the yin-yang jade pendant in her hand. A faint smile hung at the corner of her lips. As a virtual creature, I think you should be familiar with it. Just now, when I activated this thing, I realized that my view had changed to a high altitude. What's more coincidental is that when the view zoomed in, it coincided with the camera angle of the live broadcast room. System, do you have anything to say about this? The system, which was originally bold and confident, was now as quiet as a chicken. It didn't make a sound. Jiang Pingji said with certainty, "You have a carrier. I will find it sooner or later." As mentioned earlier, the life structure of virtual creatures was not stable. If they left their original environment, it was like fish leaving water. They wouldn't live long at all. The so-called carrier was like a fish tank filled with water and oxygen. With it, wouldn't the fish jump around? Jiang Pingji had two plans to deal with the system. The first was to restore her brain to its peak state and fight the main system head-on. But this method wasn't reliable. Who knew how many pieces the main system would cut her into? If she accidentally let a few subsystems escape, she would be fine, but she was afraid that something would happen to the people around her. The second was to destroy the carrier that the system was attached to. Even if she ignored it, both the subsystem and the main system wouldn't live long. In comparison, the second plan was easier and more perfect. But where was the carrier? According to the system's cunning character, it would definitely hide such a fatal thing well and wouldn't let people find it easily. The system was silent again. Rather than saying it was silent resistance, it was more like sitting and waiting for death. Because it knew that no matter what it said, it couldn't mislead Jiang Pingji. If it was the main system, it could still fight with Jiang Pingji head-on. Both of them had a 50-50 chance of winning. But it was only a subsystem that was split from the main system. At most, it could fool the inexperienced transmigrators or aborigines. Deceive Jiang Pingji. Didn't you see that it had been imprisoned by the other party all these years? Jiang Pingji didn't care. No matter what the system's reaction was, it was her prisoner. It wanted to fight with her at such a low level. It didn't take her seriously at all. But before dealing with the main system, she felt that she could capture the small fish and shrimp first. Jiang Pingji closed her eyes again and used her spirit to probe the yin-yang jade pendant according to the previous steps. Soon, she discovered a strange cyclone. In layman's terms, the yin-yang jade pendant was actually a terminal and login port for the spiritual network. Only when one spirit was strong enough could they log into the spiritual network. Ordinary people didn't have a strong mental brain. They could only increase the time they spent with the jade pendant and passively adapt. The so-called psychic dream was actually entering the spiritual network in an unconscious state. But Jiang Pingji was different. When the cyclone appeared, she didn't resist. She let the cyclone pull her spirit into it. Because she was mentally prepared, she wasn't surprised when the sky and clouds appeared in front of her. Instead, she followed the red line and fell to the ground. Not long after, the scenery on the ground kept magnifying in front of her. She saw an old friend. This old friend that she hadn't seen for a long time was none other than the transmigrator who had sneaked into Wanzhou. She had changed her face again. She had disguised herself as a young woman who had escaped and blended in with a group of refugees. Jiang Pingji could clearly see what was happening on the ground and hear their voices, but the people on the ground were completely unaware. She focused her attention on the young woman. Chapter 833. If the transmigrator's previous disguise was full of flaws, then this one could barely be rated 60 out of 100. System. Can I really get close to Lu Shi like this? The transmigrator, who was disguised as a refugee, squatted in a corner and pretended to take a nap, but in reality, she was talking to the system residing in her body. After a while, the system's indifferent electronic voice entered her ears. It was flat and emotionless. For now, sneaking into Wanzhou as a refugee is the safest option. Dongqing has been at war for years, creating countless refugees. The refugee population is huge. If you take the opportunity to blend in, you won't be discovered. What's more, Wanzhou is still recruiting a large number of refugees to work as laborers. This is a great opportunity. The system originally thought that the stupid host was easy to control, but sometimes the host was too stupid, and it felt aggrieved. The transmigrator bit her lower lip. She also knew that disguising as a refugee to sneak into Wanzhou was the best option, but after experiencing it for herself, she felt uncomfortable. She thought that fleeing refugees were like those in TV dramas, wearing tattered clothes and walking in groups of 2s and 3s. It wasn't difficult at all. However, reality had taught her a harsh lesson, telling her what it was like to be a refugee in a war. Can't I just teleport to Wanzhou? The transmigrator curled up her body and tried to reduce her presence, but she still felt several pairs of eyes staring at her. Some looked at her like she was food, while others treated her like merchandise. No matter what kind of gaze it was, she felt a deep sense of humiliation. The system snorted coldly and said in a mocking tone, "Host, I don't think I need to remind you again. You're now carrying a huge debt, and your reputation is in the red. Unless it's a critical moment, the popularity points mall won't allow you to go into debt again." In other words, if the transmigrator wanted to sneak into Wanzhou, she would have to rely on her superior martial arts skills and directly sneak in by crossing the mountains. However, if she chose this method, it was very likely that she would be discovered. It would be fine if she was an ordinary person, but if she was discovered by Jiang Pingji, then she would be finished. Not only was the transmigrator afraid of Jiang Pingji, but even the system attached to her was deeply afraid and didn't dare to let its guard down. After thinking about it, disguising as a refugee to sneak into Wanzhou was the safest way. Of course, there was another reason. The livestream viewers were tired of all kinds of large-scale live streams. She needed to change her style. Rather than saying that the audience was tired of the live broadcast content, it was better to say that the previous live broadcast content could not make the local tycoons continue to pay. Ever since she was saddled with a huge debt, her daily live broadcast time was extended from the original 4 hours to 24 hours. But for some reason, most of the rich husbands who used to spend a lot of money on her were nowhere to be seen. A few of them only watched the live broadcast and did not give her any tips. What was the difference between this behavior and freeloading? If she did not receive a large number of tips, and only relied on her daily quota of popularity points, when would she be able to accumulate enough to repay her debt? The transmigrator secretly clenched her teeth. Her heart was filled with hatred, but she had no choice but to put down her pride to please the rich audience. In her previous life, she was just a small online streamer. In order to make a living, she had to live stream dancing or chatting with others in a small room every day to please the rich audience. Ever since she had the system as her golden finger, she had become a nouveau riche who came to fawn over her with money. In her previous life and this life, the two completely different situations made her feel complacent, giving her a sense of superiority that looked down on all living things. She could no longer remember how long it had been since she took the initiative to ask for tips. In the past 2 months, she had been condescending to please the rich, asking for tips from the audience in a roundabout way. She even used the methods she used to lure rich men, secretly provoking the rich men to fight each other. Who knew that the rich men who used to throw money at her did not buy it? Even when she personally asked for tips, they only gave her a few small coins as a token. There was no trace of the splendor they used to throw money at her for a smile. Faced with this embarrassing situation, the transmigrator and the system discussed it carefully and agreed that the audience was just tired of the aesthetic. Since the large-scale content was unable to attract the audience's eyes, the transmigrator planned to use her talent to conquer them. When she first transmigrated, she had spent a lot of popularity points to exchange for many talent and skill books from the system. She had mastered all 4 of them. If she transmigrated back now, she would definitely become an artist who would shock the world. Unexpectedly, on the first day she changed the content of her live broadcast, the bullet screen was full of ridicule and criticism. Tisk, tsk, tsk. She's obviously a silver doll who can sleep with anyone. She thinks she's a pure and clean fairy. Methanol. What kind of song is she playing? Instead of showing off her talent here, why don't you strip naked and play 18? That's more interesting. What the hell is she dressed up like? I really don't know what kind of goddess a prostitute is pretending to be. We're here to watch you be a life teacher, not to watch you show off your talent. What kind of thing are you playing? Let's go, it's getting more and more boring. Ha ha ha, is this the legendary example of being a prostitute and maintaining a chastity memorial arch? The transmigrator saw the screen full of ridicule and was so angry that she could not even hold the pipa in her arms steadily. She closed the live broadcast in a rage and threw the pipa to the ground. She was so angry that her eyes were red, making her look lovely. She felt humiliated. Little did she know that the audience had already formed an impression of her and the live broadcast. This was a brothel that sold prostitutes. Although everyone was equal, regardless of the era, people looked down on the occupation of a prostitute. The transmigrator was labeled as such by the audience. Once she put on all her clothes and showed off her talent, in the eyes of the audience, her image would collapse. If they wanted to see a specialized classical art performance, the audience would naturally go to other live broadcast rooms, even if the talent of those live broadcasts was far inferior to hers. The viewers who came to this live broadcast room were here for the large amount of meat. And the result? Their minds were fantasizing about big fish and meat, but in the end, they were served a bowl of porridge and side dishes. What made the audience even angrier was that before they could leave while cursing, the transmigrator had already closed the live broadcast. Bah! What the hell? What right did a piece of trash with her legs spread to be unreasonable here? The transmigrator was thick-skinned. Faced with a huge debt, she could only open the live broadcast room again after being unreasonable for 2 days. However, this time, she did not put on a large-scale performance, nor did she deliberately show off her talent. Instead, she opened the live broadcast room to do her own thing. After experiencing the previous failure, she did not embarrass herself this time. After a careful discussion with the system, the transmigrator decided to wait and see what kind of content could arouse the interest of the audience, so that they would be willing to spend money for her. This went on for several days. At first, the audience was very impatient, but they gradually calmed down. Soon, the transmigrator was surprised to find that the daily decrease in the amount of donations began to increase again. She looked at the donations from the audience and found out that they were sympathizing with the refugees who left their homes and escaped from the war. Chapter 834. In her previous life, the girl from another world was just an internet celebrity. As an internet celebrity, she had an internet celebrity face, Korean semi-permanent eyebrows, an all face, and European double eyelids. She did not look outstanding without any makeup, but after putting on makeup, her face was still very pretty. However, although her face was pretty, it did not have any memorable features. There were tens of thousands of internet celebrities like her, and everyone wanted to stand out, but standing out was not an easy task. In order to gain popularity, she often posted weird comments on Weibo. Every trending topic had her comment, and she even slandered a few celebrities who had a bit of fame but did not have many fans. She was the fan who was bullied, and she used it to gain attention and attract trending topics. In her previous life, for the sake of being popular, she would do anything and become a fly that everyone hated. Now, for the sake of the audience's rewards and enthusiasm, she did not mind using refugees to eat their human blood buns. However, when she really disguised herself as a refugee and mixed in with them, she realized that the drama had lied to her. "I know I can't buy on credit anymore, but," as she said that, she frowned in disgust. The system asked her unhappily, "But what? Can't you just say everything in one go?" Facing the system's bad attitude, the girl felt indignant, but she did not dare to resist. She could only curse in her heart. "But these refugees are not good people. Didn't you notice that they..." The girl wanted to say something but stopped. Thinking about what she had seen and heard these days, her stomach could not help but turn and her throat felt like vomiting. These days, she had seen lone women being bullied more than once. If she did not have peerless martial arts, she might have been dragged to a corner and bullied by the male refugees. In comparison, robbing, stealing, hurting, and human trafficking were all small matters. Some refugees were so hungry that they would steal other people's children, kill them, and cook them. Some even ate them raw. Most of the refugees had numb and lifeless eyes, as if they were walking corpses. The girl felt that she had not mixed into a group of refugees, but had clearly mixed into hell, and the refugees around her were all evil spirits. The system snorted coldly. It was clearly an electronic voice, but the girl could still hear its disdain and ridicule. "Who told you that refugees are good people?" The time traveler was stunned for a moment. She stammered, but they are all humans. They actually eat human flesh. It's so disgusting. The people of ancient times were supposed to be simple, kind, ignorant, and vulgar. Regardless of the label, they should not be so devoid of humanity. As expected of the ignorant ancient times, the quality was really low. Fortunately, she could return to her own world. The system was shocked by the woman's words, and then it was speechless for a long time. "Please, this is a time of war." It said sarcastically, "Look at them, they don't have enough to eat, they don't have warm clothes, they're sallow and skinny, their clothes are ragged, they look like black people from afar." They were now on the run, not on the run. When human nature becomes vile, even Buddha can't enlighten them. Do you expect them to talk about the 8 honors and 8 shames at this time and learn the core values of socialism? The transmigrator was speechless, not knowing how to refute. After a while, the system said, "It is human nature to sympathize with the weak. The more miserable the refugees are, the more benefits you will get." The audience in the streaming room sympathized with the refugees who had suffered miserably. The transmigrator also told the audience that their rewards could be converted into money, rice, and cloth in this world. Therefore, the rewards during this period of time were like the opening of a dam. It was even more than during the peak period. Hearing the system say that, the transmigrator bit her lower lip and reluctantly accepted her fate. Although these refugees could bring her benefits, she really did not want to mix with them. It was so dirty. It was dirty and smelly. The surrounding air was polluted by the sour stench of their bodies. Apart from that, there was another reason that she could not stand it. She was a beauty that could cause the downfall of a country. How could she be coveted by just anyone? The gazes of the surrounding refugees disgusted her. She could not wait to dig out their eyeballs one by one. The transmigrator talked to the system in her heart. The audience in the streaming room did not notice any clues and continued to squander their sympathy. However, even if the audience in the streaming room could not hear it, it did not mean that Jiang Pingji could not hear it. She floated in mid-air and watched everything. She even heard the whispers between the transmigrator and the system. She suddenly laughed out of anger. She had seen many shameless people, but it was her first time seeing someone so shameless. At that moment, the transmigrator below complained to the system again. Although the rewards are a lot, it won't last long. It can't be used to exchange for the debt. The system said, so you have to work harder in streaming to repay the debt. I'm already working very hard. The transmigrator gritted her teeth and thought of a plan. System, why don't you ease the debt first? If my streaming room can be upgraded to another level, then I can earn more points in installments. Sharpening the axe will not delay the work of cutting firewood. Just agree to it. The transmigrator's streaming room had been upgraded to level 6. It could currently accommodate 700,000 viewers. If Jiang Pingji had not interfered and caused her to bear a huge debt, the streaming room might have been upgraded to level 7. The maximum number of viewers would have expanded to 1,500,700,000 viewers. That was 700,000 popularity points. She split the points with the system, but she only received 350,000 points. Even with the viewers' rewards, the accumulation speed was still too slow. If the streaming room could be upgraded to another level, the maximum number of viewers would reach 1.5 million. Then she would receive 750,000 points in a day. The system said flatly, no. The transmigrator was angry. She muttered that the system was stingy and did not see the big picture. When Jiang Pingji saw this, she suddenly felt bored. She memorized her surroundings and exited the spiritual network. When she opened her eyes, the scene in front of her changed from the suburbs to the district headquarters. Jiang Pingji got up and glanced at the topographic map of Wanzhou. She roughly calculated the transmigrator's current location. She silently calculated the distance of the refugees and sneered in her heart. TSK. I'll let you be free and unfettered for a few more days. Jiang Pingji summoned Su Ku and asked him, have there been any unusual movements outside of Wanzhou recently? There were a lot fewer refugees in Wanzhou. Shangjing was being rebuilt and could provide a lot of jobs for the refugees. The refugees that Jiang Pingji had seen just now should have flooded in from outside Wanzhou. The refugees meant that social security was in chaos. If they were not properly settled down, there might be other disasters. Su Ku thought about it and remembered some news. His face could not help but become more solemn. He said, the rescue of the emperor has just ended. Most of the vassals have returned to their respective territories. They haven't had the time to cause trouble. However, there are 2 places that have become chaotic. 2 places. Where? Jiang Pingji asked. Su Ku replied, one is Wulong County in Haozhou. Now there's no leader. The relatives of the former county chief are fighting for power. The other place is Dongmen County in Jiangzhou. My lord, we received news this morning that the county chief of Dongmen County, Yang Jian, has been poisoned. What? Chapter 835. Young Jian was dead. But before the end of the alliance meeting, young Jian was still fine. When she heard the news of his death, Jiang Pingji almost couldn't react. She pursed her lips. Her dark, starry eyes were filled with doubt. Su Ku had said that Yang Jian had been poisoned and killed. Poisoned? Which enemy did it? Jiang Pingji didn't know much about Yang Jian. She only knew that he had a relationship with her father, but she didn't know much else. If it wasn't an enemy, why would they resort to such a despicable method? Su Ku said, according to the news, it seems to be done by the aristocrats of Dongmen County. Jiang Pingji's expression turned cold. She asked, "Are you sure it's the local aristocrats of Dongmen County?" Su Ku answered, "This matter. I think it's very likely. Other than the prominent aristocrats, the other aristocrats don't have much confidence. Zhangzhou is Prince Changshuo's fief, and these aristocrats make a living on his territory. For the sake of their family's glory and continuity, they naturally have to take measures to protect themselves. Prince Changshuo is already the emperor, but Yang Jian resolutely joined the army to rescue the emperor. Isn't this clearly opposing Prince Changshuo? If Yang Jian is killed, not only will they be able to move away a huge obstacle, but they can also use it to surrender to Prince Changshuo. Yang Jian joining the army to rescue the emperor was one thing, but the alliance army didn't do anything, so they didn't completely kill Prince Changshuo. Jiang Pingji thought about it carefully, her furrowed brows never relaxing. Su Ku's speculation seemed to be correct, but he seemed to have some misunderstandings about the aristocrats. That shouldn't be the reason. The aristocrats indeed like to seek benefits and avoid harm, but they preferred to be wise and play safe, watching the people below them fight. When the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. That was what they liked the most. Why would they personally poison Yang Jian and assassinate him at this time? To surrender to Prince Changshuo, it was logical to assassinate Yang Jian, but it didn't fit the style of the aristocrats. Su Ku was puzzled. He humbly asked, "Then who do you think did it, my lord?" Jiang Pingji revealed a faint smile, but her eyes were tinged with sharpness. It could be the aristocrats, but it most likely wasn't to surrender to Prince Changshuo. It's more likely to be a personal grudge. Su Ku was surprised and took a deep breath. A personal grudge. Jiang Pingji sneered meaningfully. This time, Yang Jian has contributed greatly to the rescue of the emperor. Now that Yang Jian's power had grown, the first to act would naturally be his enemies. It was possible that they would try to assassinate him first. Su Ku sighed. Regardless of whether it was the work of the landowning households or the enemy, it was a pity that a hero like Yang Jian had died in such a manner. Although Zhangzhou was a land of abundant resources and abundant people, Prince Changshuo was not good at governing and liked to squander, so the people in the prefectures of Zhangzhou did not have an easy time. The common people were having a hard time, and the landowning households that treated them like sheep to be fleeced naturally weren't any better off. Yang Jian's temperament was rather unyielding, but for the sake of the people, he was willing to bend over backwards. Back in the day, when Dongmen County experienced several natural disasters, he was the one who had shamelessly borrowed food from his neighbor, Lu Shi, who was also the county chief of Hu County. Even when he was rejected, he could still put on a nonchalant smile. If not for Yang Jian, who knew how many people in Dongmen Commandery would have died? Jiang Pingji's tone was calm as she said, "It was a pity that he died young." Although the landowning households in Dongmen Commandery did not like Yang Jian, they still needed him as a shield. Why would they kill him so easily? Wanzhou and Zhangzhou were very far apart, so news traveled slowly. But she was right about one thing. Yang Jian was not killed by the alliance of the landowning households. Instead, he was sought by his enemies. Previously, during the rescue of the emperor, Yang Jian still had an arrow wound on his body. Although the wound was not fatal, he still needed to rest and recuperate. However, in order to render a meritorious service, Yang Jian gave it his all. After the rescue of the emperor, the arrow wound on his body opened up again. It took him nearly a month to recover. Yang Jian brought his troops back to Dongmen Commandery in Zhangzhou. Immediately, he was invited to a banquet by the landowning households, big and small. In a short period of time, he became a popular figure. With Prince Changshu becoming the emperor, everyone was unsure. Naturally, they thought of ways to get some information from Yang Jian. Yang Jian told them the truth and even revealed his ambition. Prince Changshu had brought more than 100,000 troops to besiege Qinzhou. After fighting for a year, he did not manage to conquer Qinzhou. Instead, he ran out of ammunition and rations and suffered heavy casualties. If not for the interference of the Meng family in Sangzhou, Prince Changshu would not have been able to become the emperor. He would have packed his bags and returned to his fief in Zhangzhou. Although Prince Changshu had become the emperor, most of his troops belonged to the Meng family, not him. Yang Jian made a great contribution during the rescue of the emperor and received many benefits. He rushed back to Dongmen Commandery in Zhangzhou in advance. He wanted to use this opportunity to unite the landowning households and take drastic measures. He wanted to take advantage of Prince Changshu's weakness to bring him down. Who knew that his painstaking efforts would be ruined in the hands of his enemies? In the end, he died with a grievance. When he died, he was in extreme pain. His lips were black, blood flowed from his orifices, his pupils were dilated, and his body convulsed for a day and a night before it gradually cooled down. Such a tragic scene, not to mention witnessing it with one's own eyes. Even hearing about it was enough to send chills down one's spine. Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows and looked at Su Ku. So, Yang Tao took over Yang Jian's business. Su Ku muttered to himself for a while, then said, of course it was Yang Jian's only son who took over. But, he's still young. I'm afraid he won't be able to control the situation. As the only son, Yang Tao naturally took over everything from Yang Jian. But he was young and inexperienced, so he couldn't control the old official. The landowning households in Dongmen Commandery were uneasy, the old official was arrogant and despotic, and there was still Prince Changshu, the big trouble. Without Yang Jian to protect him, Yang Tao suddenly faced so much pressure that he almost couldn't breathe. But he couldn't fall. He had to arrange a proper funeral for his father. He was like a blind man walking in an unfamiliar wilderness. Thorns and rocks were everywhere under his feet. After Yang Jian's death, there was no one to protect him from the wind and rain. Shengze. My lord, Lin is here. You can focus on handling the old lord's funeral. You don't have to worry about anything else. Yan Lin was dressed in plain clothes with a white cloth tied around his waist. He knelt behind Yang Tao and kept vigil with him. After 7 days, Yang Tao had lost a lot of weight. The clothes that originally fitted him were now empty, and it was especially unbearable to look at. Yang Tao had cried for a few days. Now his eyes were red, swollen, and bloodshot. His eyes were dry, and he couldn't shed any more tears. On the day Yang Jian was poisoned, he stayed in the house and took care of him day and night, but there was nothing he could do. Looking at his father, who had always loved him dearly, in agony before his death, he wished he could take his place. If it weren't for the support of someone reliable, Yang Tao might have collapsed a long time ago. Chapter 836. The last sentence was squeezed out from Yang Tao's molars. The hatred in his words was thick and deep. Yan Lin looked down, a murderous glint in his eyes. That day will come. He moved his lips and said gently, "You don't have to thank me, my lord. This is what I should do. Even though they weren't biological brothers, they were very close, even more than blood brothers. Yan Lin wasn't only Yang Tao's best friend, but he was also his caretaker. After taking care of a kid for so many years, Yan Lin had long developed the habit of taking care of Yang Tao. As for Zhao Xiao, Yan Lin secretly suppressed his anger. There was no rush. One day, he would grind his bones to dust. Zhao Xiao was a famous scholar in Dongmen County. Zhao Xiao was from a noble family in Dongmen County. He was sinister, vicious, and vengeful. Speaking of his feud with Yang Jian, it could be traced back to more than 10 years ago. One of Zhao Xiao's brothers was killed by the young Yang Jian in the village, and the two became enemies. Years later, the conflict and hatred between the two deepened. When Zhao Xiao heard that Yang Jian had benefited from protecting the emperor, he was afraid that Yang Jian would gain power and kill him, so he decided to strike first. Poor Yang Jian was defenseless, and with the arrow wound on his body, he was tortured by a cup of poisoned wine for an entire night before he breathed his last. Dongmen County was located at the border of Jiangzhou, in the south. It was next to Hu County and separated from Wanzhou by mountains and rivers. In other words, the refugees she saw on the spiritual network were not from Dongmen County. Then, Jiang Pingji rubbed her brows and organized her thoughts. She then asked Su Ku, Wulong County in Haozhou is without a leader. All the forces are fighting each other. Is it bad? Su Ku answered, it's bad. I feel sorry for the homeless people. Wulong County was not far from Wanzhou. Without a doubt, the refugees Jiang Pingji saw came from there. At this point, there were only 3 ways to stabilize Wulong County. First, Jiang Pingji could use the only son of Wulong County as a puppet to control the place from afar. However, this option had been rejected long ago. It was not suitable for the time being. Second, she could wait for the internal strife in Wulong County to come to an end. This was definitely a bad idea. The longer the infighting dragged on, the more the local people would suffer. Thirdly, Jiang Pingji took a deep breath and made up her mind. Before the attack on Jiamen Pass, Jiang Pingji and her strategists had carefully analyzed the whereabouts of the orphans from Wulong County. After some discussion, they unanimously decided to use the orphans of Wulong County in exchange for some benefits, giving the highly sought-after Wulong County to Huang Song. But why hadn't there been any movement from Huang Song's side? She frowned as she thought about it. When Su Ku saw this, he couldn't help but ask with concern, "What are you worried about, my lord?" "It's nothing. You can go and do your own things first." Seeing that Su Ku still wanted to say something, Jiang Pingji said, "I want to be alone. No matter what it is, let's talk about it tomorrow." "Xiaoyu, I'm tired." Since Jiang Pingji had said so, Su Ku could not force her. When Su Ku bowed and left, Jiang Pingji heaved a sigh of relief. She leaned back on the mat and closed her eyes. She looked like she was taking a nap, but she was actually poking at the system in her heart. The system was annoyed. Jiang Pingji asked, "System, do you have any way to upgrade the streaming room?" The system knew that it was doomed, but it would be better to live for another day. It knew that it would be safe until the system's main body was captured. "Just let me out. Your authority is very low. Without me, you won't be able to upgrade the streaming room by yourself." Jiang Pingji secretly raised her eyebrows and sneered. "Is there no other way?" The system was confused. It didn't know why she asked that. Of course not. The system was puzzled. Wasn't the host always on guard against me? Why didn't it let me upgrade the streaming room? Why did it suddenly mention upgrading the streaming room today? Jiang Pingji asked it with a smile, "If I take away the subsystem from that woman, will the two subsystems merge? To make an analogy, the complete system was a glass of water. It poured some water into other glasses and separated them into different subsystems. So, if the subsystem was captured, could it merge the two glasses of water? Theoretically, it should be possible, right? The system remained silent, and Jiang Pingji didn't expect it to answer. After a while, Jiang Pingji went to disturb the system again. The system was furious. Damn, are you done? TSK, TSK, TSK. Young people can't keep their cool. The system couldn't bear it anymore and said, get lost. The other subordinates were so busy that they kicked the back of their heads. This unreliable lord was slacking off and sleeping here. Wasn't she afraid that the subordinates would rebel against her? The system was angry. There were people following such a stupid person who exploited other people's labor, and all of them were so damn loyal. They were blind. At the same time, at the border of Wanzhou, a few carriages with simple decorations slowly drove to the pass. The wheels squeaked as they rolled forward in circles. The official road leading to Wanzhou had been in disrepair for years. It was rugged and bumpy, making it difficult to travel. The carriages swayed along with it. Mr. Cheng, the pass is up ahead. There were dozens of guards outside the carriage. The man in the lead was riding a tall horse. Although the man was dressed in casual linen clothes, his body was broad and his muscles were strong. He was like a hard brown stone. Even his loose clothes were full and bulging from his muscles. The man rode forward to the carriage in the middle of the group and slowed down. At that moment, the curtain of the carriage was lifted by a slender hand, revealing half of the man's face. There are more and more refugees outside. Do they want to go to Wanzhou too? The person who spoke was none other than Huang Song strategist, Qing Jing. He was sitting upright in the carriage with a bamboo scroll filled with small characters on his lap. After traveling for dozens of days, he looked a lot thinner, and there were bruises under his eyes. I've asked. They're all refugees who want to go to Wanzhou. Qing Jing lowered his eyelids and said softly, is that so? As he said this, he lowered the curtain to block out the dazzling orange sunlight outside. Qing Jing had been ordered by Huang Song to personally negotiate with Wanzhou about the ownership of the only son of the Wulong County chief of Haozhou. If Huang Song wanted to unify Haozhou, he needed a good reason. If he could control the orphan of the Wulong County chief of Haozhou, he could naturally send troops in the name of recovering his deceased father's inheritance. This was also one of Qing Jing's reasons for coming. Originally, this mission should have been Feng Ju's. After all, Feng Ju and Feng Jin were biological brothers, and it was easier to negotiate with biological brothers. However, in order to avoid arousing suspicion, Qing Jing took over Feng Ju's mission in the end. After all, Feng Ju was also the third son of the Feng family's favored wife. If the forces in Wanzhou suspected that they had sent Feng Ju to negotiate on the surface, but secretly had him contact the Feng family, that would be terrible. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, they had to substitute Qing Jing at the last minute. After leaving Huang Song's territory, the world outside was desolate. There was no sound of chickens and dogs barking at each other. When they reached the border of Wanzhou, they could see groups of refugees from time to time. Qing Jing was meticulous and thoughtful. Chapter 837. Qing Jing's entourage traveled for a while. More refugees appeared in front of them. The tall man's expression darkened. He raised his hand and ordered the guards to surround the carriages to prevent Qing Jing from being offended by the refugees. He had thought that the situation would improve slightly at the pass, but he didn't expect to see so many refugees outside. In an instant, the man's face turned green. Mr. Cheng, I'm afraid we can't get through. Qing Jing frowned when he felt the carriage stop. He raised his hand to lift the bamboo curtain and asked the man on the horse outside. Huan Shu, what's going on? The man on the horse was called Yuan Chong. His courtesy name was Hing Shu. He was a capable general under Huang Song and had been sent to escort Qing Jing. Hearing Qing Jing's question, Yuan Chong hurriedly clamped the horse's belly and made it move a few steps forward until it was level with the window. Yuan Chong said respectfully, Mr. Qing, there are refugees gathered at the pass ahead. I'm afraid we won't be able to get through for a while. Qing Jing didn't do something as rude as sticking his head out of the window. Instead, he ordered the driver to stop and got out of the carriage. He was shocked when he saw the scene in front of him. He knew that the refugees from Wulong County had all gone to Wanzhou, but he didn't expect there to be so many. From what he could see, there were at least 1,000 refugees. Yuan Chong jumped off the horse and walked to Qing Jing's side. Lu Shi is too careless to allow so many refugees to gather outside Wanzhou Pass. With so many refugees, it was easy to cause trouble. If these refugees were incited, there was no telling what they would do. Yuan Chong couldn't help but frown when he saw so many refugees gathering outside Wanzhou Pass, and even more refugees gathering here. The sun in the sky was as hot as fire, causing the ground to be covered in mist. Anyone who casually wiped their face would find their palms covered in greasy sweat. The sun made them feel irritated and powerless. Yes, they're all refugees. No one knew what Qing Jing was thinking, but he subconsciously responded. Yuan Chong didn't disturb Qing Jing. Instead, he crooked his finger at the guard beside him. The guard understood and immediately took out a paper umbrella from another carriage and handed it to Yuan Chong. Yuan Chong took the paper umbrella and opened it to cover Qing Jing's head from the sun. A military general's skin was coarse and thick, and he could take a beating and fall, but a scholar always wore a scholarly gown. He looked elegant and delicate, and needed to be carefully served. Noticing the shadow above his head, Qing Jing only raised his gaze slightly. He did not decline or thank her. Mr. Qing, this general will send someone to inquire about it. Let's see the situation first. Yuan Chong suggested, and Qing Jing nodded in agreement. It's good to send someone to ask. He wanted to know how these refugees would be settled in Wanzhou. If they weren't settled well, these refugees would become thorny tumors. This general will do it right away. In terms of official positions, Qing Jing and Yuan Chong were equal, and the latter did not need to be humble. However, even their lord, Huang Song, was so respectful to the strategists that his subordinates naturally followed suit and did not dare to slight them. Yuan Chong was one of the more good-tempered generals. When he was young, he loved to read and did not have the bad habits of ordinary martial artists. If it were someone else, perhaps they would complain about the delicacy of scholars and the fact that they had to stop for a while. However, Yuan Chong would not. On the contrary, he respected Qing Jing very much. Not long after, the soldier who was sent out to investigate returned. Qing Jing called the soldier over and asked him carefully, "What's the situation at the pass?" The soldier answered truthfully. As he asked and answered, Qing Jing's expression became more and more solemn, which attracted Yuan Chong's attention. "Sir, is there something wrong?" Yuan Chong carefully recalled what the soldier had just said and could not think of anything that could make Qing Jing so serious. Qing Jing could not withstand the heat. He had his own rules and regulations. No matter how hot the weather was, he wore his scholarly robes tightly, and his sleeves could cover half his fingers. Now that he was outside the carriage, even with a paper umbrella over his head to block the sun, he was still sweating from the heat. "There's something wrong." Qing Jing's voice was a little weak and full of solemnity. Yuan Chong was suspicious. At this moment, he was like a monk scratching his head. No matter how he thought about it, he could not figure out what was wrong. Although his IQ could make him look superior to ordinary generals, he could not keep up with a brain expert even if he used all his strength. Yuan Chong was puzzled. I'm stupid. I really can't figure it out. Please enlighten me, sir. Qing Jing explained, just now, the soldier said that Wanzhou will send people to register the refugees at the pass and carefully ask them about their origins, birthplace, age, and family. They will select them one by one based on their family, gender, and age. They will then form groups of 100 and bring them into the pass. Yuan Chong nodded and said, I just think that this method is a little stupid. Not only is it a waste of time, but it's also tiring. Qing Jing shook his head and said, waste of time. Not necessarily. As for whether it's tiring or not, it's hard to say. Registering the refugees is indeed beneficial to management. When a large number of refugees gather together, it's easy to cause trouble. If someone is sincere in stirring up trouble, it will inevitably bring trouble to Wanzhou. Wanzhou did not ignore the refugees. Instead, they sent people to register the refugees at the pass and then brought them into the pass in batches. Isn't this also surveillance? Now, people are needed everywhere in Wanzhou. These refugees came at the right time. Bring the refugees to places where people are needed so that they can work there. However, Yuan Chong's thoughts went astray. He thought of forced labor, and a look of pity appeared on his face. The refugees were willing to leave their homes to escape the flames of war and protect the lives of their families. But forced labor was too hard, and it was often a narrow escape from death. It was probably much scarier than the flames of war. Yuan Chong really couldn't figure it out. Why did these refugees gather in Wanzhou? He voiced his doubts, but Qing Jing smiled bitterly. You're wrong. Forced labor in Wanzhou is different from other places. Qing Jing and Feng Zhen knew each other. The two of them had successfully gone from pen pals to real friends during the alliance meeting. Although their positions were different, as long as they didn't mention official matters, they could still maintain a private friendship. Through Feng Zhen's words, Qing Jing knew that forced labor in Wanzhou was not free or unpaid. It was more like an employer and a laborer. You contribute, and I contribute money and food. It's an equal exchange. Once the refugees were uprooted, they were like duckweed without roots. Not only could Wanzhou provide a stable place to live, but it could also provide work and food. It was simply a holy land in the hearts of the refugees. When Yuan Chong heard this, he couldn't help but be speechless. If we were to distribute money and food to the people doing forced labor, how much money would that cost? Qing Jing lowered his eyes and said, Lu Shi doesn't lack money. Yuan Chong nodded in agreement. That's true. Lu Shi's father, Lu Shi, still secretly controls Hu County. He does indeed not lack money. Qing Jing looked at the slowly moving crowd of refugees in the distance. They were crowded together in a dense mass, and they looked like black algae. Although the workload of registering refugees was great, the benefits that followed were endless. The most direct benefit was that the risk of a refugee riot was reduced. Another benefit was that the labor of these refugees could be used reasonably. Yuan Chong, who was beside him, said, But, even so, sir, you shouldn't look so pale. Chapter 838. Yuan Chong said, This. I know. Qing Jing asked again, Do you think Wulong County is closer to Maota County or Wanzhou? Wulong County and Maota County were neighbors, but to get to Wanzhou, one had to cross a third of the state. It would take 1 to 2 months on foot. Yuan Chong said naturally, Of course Maota County is closer. Qing Jing smiled bitterly and asked, Since Maota County is closer, why did the refugees come to Wanzhou? If the refugees went to Maota County, they would be leaving their homes, but they would still be in the same state. A few. But they went to Wanzhou, which was near Haozhou. This was thought-provoking. Yuan Chong finally realized something was wrong, and his expression changed. He said, "Someone is playing tricks. Damn it, how could this be?" The governor of Maota County was Yuan Chong's lord, Huang Song. At the same time, Huang Song was Yuan Chong's cousin. Huang Song's ancestors had been prominent for a while, but because of poor management by his descendants, they slowly withered. Huang Song's surname was Yuan. His grandfather died when he was young. Because the family was poor, the clan could not take care of Huang Song's grandmother, who was young and widowed. In order to survive, Huang Song's grandmother could only remarry her ex-husband's son to the emperor's favorite, Secretary Huang Tan. Huang Tan was a eunuch, but Huang Song's father was very sweet and gradually won Huang Tan's favor. He changed his surname and adopted him as a stepson, continuing the Huang family line. Later, with Huang Tan's help, Huang Song's father gradually became successful. He married and had children, and even helped the family. By Huang Song's generation, the Yuan family situation had improved. Coincidentally, Huang Song was short of people, so he reached out to help the younger generation of the family. This was why Yuan Chong came to serve Huang Song. Huang Song was Yuan Chong's idol, and Yuan Chong was Huang Song's die-hard fan. How could a die-hard fan tolerate hearing that his idol had been schemed against? Qing Jing saw through Yuan Chong's honest thoughts and said in amusement, "Playing tricks?" Not really. This was a normal confrontation. Qing Jing could only say that he was not as skilled as Wei Xiai and could not blame his opponent for being treacherous. Today, Qing Jing still did not know that in terms of playing with people's hearts and public opinion, which strategist in the world could beat Wei Xiai? Qing Jing asked about it in detail. The refugees had all come to Wanzhou because they had heard about how great Wanzhou was from their relatives. As for how these relatives knew about this, well, in reality, they had only heard about it through hearsay. There was no way to find out the source of the rumors. Wei Xiai had not only set a trap for Huang Song, he had cast a wide net and spread the news everywhere, subtly influencing the people to brainwash and promote his lord. Do you still remember that Wei Xi's pen name is Zai Qi? Wei Xiai had suffered a loss in his previous life. In this life, he naturally had to control the steering wheel of public opinion early on and become an experienced driver. Gossiping was originally a means of public opinion. Luring children to sing nursery rhymes, hiring hooligans to spread the word, and letting wandering knights who traveled from the south to the north sell their products everywhere. These were all means of public opinion. It seemed inconspicuous, but it would play a huge role in crucial times. Wulong County was neither near nor far from Wanzhou. The people had been uprooted by the flames of war. When they thought about where it would be safer to turn to, the first thing that came to mind was Wanzhou. 1 or 2 refugees were nothing, but when the surrounding people all leaned toward Wanzhou, that blind obedience in people's bones would come into play. One group of refugees led another group of refugees, and like a rolling snowball, the refugee group grew larger and larger until it developed to the scale it was today. Out of 100 refugees, at least 60% were willing to give up what was close at hand and seek what was far away, choosing Wanzhou. To be honest, Qing Jing should be the scapegoat. As Huang Song's strategist, he could not plan everything for his lord. Instead, he let people take advantage of a loophole. He really should not have done that. What was even more frustrating was that Huang Song now had a favor to ask of Wanzhou, so he could not flare up at all. He could only pinch his nose and accept it. The refugees had legs, and no one else could decide for them where they wanted to go except for the refugees themselves. Being unable to attract the refugees was Huang Song's failure, and even more so, it was the failure of Qing Jing's subordinates. Yuan Chong did not understand, but he saw that Qing Jing's complexion was much better. He should be fine, right? He asked someone to fetch a water skin from the carriage, then fetched a clean handkerchief and handed it to Qing Jing. Sir, wipe your sweat and drink some water to cool off. Judging by the weather, I'm afraid it'll be hot for a while. Qing Jing took the handkerchief and was about to wipe away the sweat on his forehead when he heard a clamor for help coming from outside. What happened? Yuan Chong took advantage of his height to stand on tiptoe and take a look. It seems like there's a conflict between refugees. It was not accurate to say that there was a conflict between refugees. To be precise, there were a few male refugees who were impatient and wanted to take advantage of a woman who was alone. Naturally, the woman would not let it go. If she was caught by these people, even a fool would know what would happen to her. She bit someone and took advantage of the pain to run away. As she ran, she tried to find help. Seeing that there were many people on Qing Jing's side and that there were dozens of strong guards in uniform standing guard, she mustered up her courage and ran over. Stop! 2 guards drew their swords and stopped the madly running woman. The woman's face was covered in tears as she knelt in a sorry state and begged the guards. Behind her, several madmen were still shouting and cursing. Qing Jing was not far away. When he saw this scene, he frowned and looked rather displeased. Yuan Chong read Qing Jing's mind and snorted, "What's with the ruckus?" The guards half knelt and begged for forgiveness. The woman was stunned. She took a few steps forward and tried to grab Yuan Chong's trousers. Save this little woman." Yuan Chong gestured for the guards to arrest the madman and said to the woman, "Madam, you're safe now." The woman wiped her face with her sleeve, revealing a disheveled but beautiful face. "Thank you, General, for saving me." The madmen were still shouting and cursing. Their mouths were not clean, so the guards secretly kicked them a few times. Yuan Chong was also angry. How could they dirty his master's ears with their filthy words? He was just about to send someone to kill these evil madmen when Qing Jing said, "Forget it. Huan Shu, let them go." Yuan Chong did not understand. Qing Jing was someone who could not tolerate sand in his eyes. How could he allow a few perverted people to live? Qing Jing glanced at the miserable woman kneeling on the ground and sighed. "It's fine if you beat them up. They don't deserve death." The woman's tears, which had just stopped, streamed down her cheeks. Who wouldn't be sad? If these madmen were alive, she would definitely be targeted once they left Qing Jing and the others. Qing Jing lowered his eyes and said, "Heng Shu, let's go." Yuan Chong did not dare to disobey Qing Jing's orders. He ordered his men to take the madmen to the side and beat them up before letting them go. Bah! The guards spat disdainfully as they looked at the madmen who were wailing like pigs being slaughtered. Animals! Qing Jing entered the carriage. The caravan moved forward slowly again. This time, they had an extra tail. Yuan Chong wanted to chase her away, but the woman was afraid of running into the madman and refused to leave. "Master! That woman is still following us." At this moment, Qing Jing's cold voice came from the carriage. "Send someone to keep an eye on them." Yuan Chong was surprised. He looked back in disbelief and said in a low voice, "Master, that woman," Qing Jing said concisely, "if there's a problem, don't make it public. See what she wants to do." Chapter 839. Yuan Chong accepted the order, but he still had some doubts. Why did the master feel that there was something strange about the woman? He blinked his eyes in confusion. His sharp and spirited eyes were filled with doubt. He looked at Qing Jing with a pitiful expression. Qing Jing didn't answer. Instead, he looked at the back of the convoy thoughtfully. That woman was still persistently following him. What was she planning? Qing Jing put down the curtain and picked up the bamboo scroll he was halfway through reading. He quickly immersed himself in it and concentrated. Having received the order, Yuan Chong didn't dare to underestimate the little tail following behind them. No matter how hard he racked his brain, he couldn't find any flaws. He didn't know why Master Qing Jing would suspect her at first sight. Yuan Chong stared at her for a while and thought to himself, no matter how I look at her, she doesn't look like a threatening woman. Her lower body is unstable when she walks, her breathing is rapid, and her hands don't show any signs of martial arts training. Could the master be mistaken? Of course, he didn't have the guts to voice his doubts. After all, Qing Jing relied on his brain to make a living. If his IQ was lower than Yuan Chang's, he wouldn't be considered a counselor. Could it be that the woman was hiding too much? Yuan Chong rode on the back of the horse, his right hand pressing on the hilt of his knife. He seemed to be swaying his head along with the horse's hooves, but he was actually on high alert. He stayed close to Qing Jing, keeping a distance from him and paying attention to the woman at the back of the convoy. The woman didn't know that she was being suspected. She didn't even hear the conversation between Qing Jing and Yuan Chong. 10 feet was about 34 meters. An ordinary person would barely hear anything from that distance, even if they spoke loudly. But for a peerless master like the woman, who had sharp senses, it was a piece of cake. It was a pity that although she had peerless martial arts, it was learned through a skill book. The skill book could make her a martial arts master with rich combat experience. There was no doubt about that. However, she still lacked the basic qualities and habits of a martial artist. A real martial artist would always be vigilant at all times. It wasn't a deliberate action, but a habit, like Jiang Pingji. As for the woman in front of him, she had peerless martial arts. If she met someone at the same level as her, she would still be defeated. She stepped on a piece of gravel and slipped, almost twisting to the ground. She cried out in pain. Her voice was faint and soft, as if she was sobbing and moaning. It touched the softest part of her heart. When Yuan Chong heard this sound, his body stiffened and he unnaturally tightened his grip on the horse's belly. If he was already like this, the other ordinary guards were even more shameful. "Madam, can you not follow us? This is the pass to Wanzhou, and those madmen have been beaten up, so they probably won't bully you again." Yuan Chong rode forward and lashed the horse whip in his hand on the shoulders of a few guards. They cried out in pain and took 2 steps forward with an unnatural expression, as if there were some jackals, wolves, tigers, or leopards chasing after them. Oh my God, that sound was too seductive. The woman sat paralyzed on the ground. Her hair fell to the side of her face, making her palm-sized face look even more pitiful. Her watery eyes seemed to be able to drown people. I. General, this little woman, the woman stammered, unable to speak. She twisted her fingers and sleeves nervously. Her eyes were red and misty. She was probably frightened. It wasn't easy for her to find a sense of security, but she was driven away by a fiendish martial artist. She looked very pitiful. Yuan Chong said, "Madam, we are entering the pass to visit our relatives. It's not convenient for you to follow us." What needed to be said had been said, but the woman still refused to leave. Of course, she couldn't leave. She had used a few pieces of silver to hire the madman to put on a show. If she didn't achieve her goal, wouldn't she lose a lot? At first, Yuan Chong couldn't detect anything wrong with the woman, but after repeatedly driving her away, she still refused to leave. He became suspicious. The woman was none other than the woman who had been targeted by Jiang Pingji earlier. The woman was full of confidence, but it was not without reason. If she hadn't met people like Jiang Pingji or Qing Jing who were meticulous in their observation, the possibility of the woman getting away with it was very high. Even with Jiang Pingji's harsh qualifications, she could give the woman's disguise a score of 60 points. It was naturally difficult for ordinary people to see through it. For example, Yuan Chong didn't notice anything wrong at first. However, a perfect disguise not only required a flawless appearance, but also superb acting skills and thorough details. No matter which part of the disguise was slightly flawed, it was very easy to expose one's identity. The woman had learned her lesson a few times before. She had put a lot of effort into disguising herself. There was nothing wrong with that. The problem was that she had chosen the wrong place and time, which was why Qing Jing had seen through her disguise. Now that they were about to enter Wanzhou's checkpoint, there were soldiers outside to maintain order. Which refugee would be so bold as to chase after a good-looking woman with the intention of raping her? Don't forget, the magistrate of Wanzhou was a woman. Would she allow such a thing to happen at the border of Wanzhou? Was a momentary lust for beauty more important, or was her own life more important? When Yuan Chong said he wanted to hack the madman to death, the madman's reactions were very interesting. Qing Jing wasn't blind, so how could he not see it? Apart from that, the woman's eyes and temperament were also failures. She didn't have the confusion and numbness that an ordinary refugee should have. For a woman to be able to escape from Wulong County to Wanzhou, she must be very wary of the outside world. She wouldn't easily reveal her true appearance. But what did the woman do after escaping danger? She used her sleeve to wipe her face, revealing a disheveled but beautiful face. Was this reasonable? Flaws like this were everywhere. If one was a little careless, they would overlook it. But Qing Jing wasn't that kind of careless. Mr. Cheng, we can't get rid of her. It seems like she's latching on to us. I sent someone to keep an eye on her, and her reaction was interesting. It's like she came from that kind of place. Yuan Chong lowered his voice to the window. He paused mid-sentence and swallowed the rest of his words. His master was a bright moon in his arms. How could he dirty his ears with such vulgar words? Qing Jing put the bamboo slip in his hand aside, straightened his slightly wrinkled sleeves, and said thoughtfully, "Forget it. When we enter the pass, we'll send her away." Although he was suspicious, this was still Lu Shi's territory. Qing Jing couldn't figure out the woman's intentions, and he was afraid that she was from Wanzhou. It wouldn't be good to kill her. To avoid trouble, it was better to be cautious. There were too many refugees waiting in line outside the pass. They waited until sunset before they were allowed to enter. Yuan Chong sent the woman away according to Qing Jing's instructions. She sobbed and limped away. The moon was high in the sky. The convoy had no choice but to sleep outside. Qing Jing always had a regular schedule. Even if the conditions were bad, he could still fall asleep on time. He closed the curtains and took off his outer robe. Just as he was about to sleep, there was an unfamiliar fragrance in the carriage. Qing Jing suddenly opened his eyes, drew the scholar's sword he wore, and stabbed it at the source of the fragrance. Heng Shu. Chapter 840. Sir, Yuan Chong, who was in a light sleep, heard the commotion and hurriedly jumped into the carriage. He found Qing Jing in his undergarments, curled up with a pained expression. "Sir! Don't make a sound," Qing Jing interrupted Yuan Chong, breathing heavily. In no time, his forehead was covered in sweat, sliding down his cheeks and neck to his collarbone. Yuan Chong did not dare to disobey Qing Jing. Suppressing his panic, he turned around and got out of the carriage, driving away the guards who had rushed over. "Everyone, keep up the vigil. Don't let go of any suspicious person." After doing this, he hurriedly returned to the carriage. By then, Qing had barely recovered his kneeling position, but his face was still very pale. "Sir, what happened?" Yuan Chong half knelt on the ground, eager to help the swaying Qing. However, just as his hand reached out, Qing pushed it away. It was at this moment that Yuan Chong noticed a large patch of black marks crawling over Qing's right hand. "Sir!" Qing's face was flushed, his breathing heavier and heavier. His cheeks were slightly swollen from exertion, and he looked to be in great pain. "I'm fine." Pushing Yuan Chong away, Qing took a moment to suppress the heart-wrenching pain. The fine veins that covered his eyes gradually faded. "Hing Shu, when you came in just now, did you see anyone suspicious?" Qing found it difficult to speak. He had to pant heavily to say 2 words, and even when he did, his speech was somewhat slurred. How could Yuan Chong remain calm when he saw Qing in this state? He looked around in panic, carefully searching through his memories, but did not see the suspicious person that Qing mentioned. From the moment Qing called out his name to the moment he rushed into the carriage, only a breath or 2 had passed. With such a short interval, unless it was a demon or ghost, it was impossible for an ordinary person to fly away under his nose. "No, I was keeping watch outside just now, but I didn't see any suspicious figures." After saying this, Yuan Chong saw Qing's unsheathed sword beside him, the blade still stained with fresh blood. "Sir, you're injured." No wonder Qing was in so much pain. Qing raised his right hand, his wide sleeve sliding down to his elbow, revealing most of his fair arm. Yuan Chong stared at Qing's arm and his scalp went numb. He saw a mass of something that looked like thick ink wriggling on Qing's arm. At first, it was only a small piece, but it soon became a large piece. He had never seen such a fantastical scene before. This. Mister. Could it be the mister who was injured by demons? Yuan Chong was so anxious that his cheeks were flushed, and his back was covered in cold sweat. Qing said, "I don't talk about strange powers and gods. Don't spout nonsense. If he was a demon, how could I have hurt him so easily?" After saying that, he looked at the sword beside him with a solemn expression. The sharp blade was still stained with blood that was gradually darkening. Yuan Chong was surprised, and the way he looked at Qing changed. Scholars practiced the 6 arts of the nobleman: etiquette, music, archery, imperial strategy, calligraphy, and mathematics. To them, carrying a sword was more ornamental than practical. To scholars, the significance of a sword was the same as jewelry to women. However, this didn't mean that they couldn't fight. In fact, those scholars who could roam outside were all capable of both literature and martial arts. They might not be able to defeat generals, but they had no problem dealing with ordinary people. Yuan Chong calmed himself down and asked, "Mister, do you feel any discomfort?" "My head hurts a little, but it's nothing serious. I stabbed that assassin." "Get someone to follow the blood trail." Qing raised his hand and pulled down his sleeve, covering the ugly, strange, jet-black mark. Recalling the fragrance of cosmetics, the woman he saw during the day floated into his mind, and he became more vigilant. "Mister's hand. Do you want to find a doctor to take a look?" Seeing Qing's calm reaction, Yuan Chong's panic that was growing like a vine in his heart also diminished. Someone who could be injured by Qing naturally couldn't be a demon. Since it wasn't a demon, there was no need to be afraid. Perhaps there was a traitor in the convoy, and the 2 of them worked together, so Yuan Chong didn't notice any suspicious person in his panic. "Not for now." Qing's expression was solemn, and he waved his hand weakly. "That person will come back. Increase the patrols." Qing was injured in front of Yuan Chong's eyes. This was a great humiliation to him. However, he couldn't let the same thing happen a second time. Yuan Chong said firmly, "Yes, don't worry, mister. I will definitely guard this place to the death and not let any suspicious person escape." This night was destined to not be peaceful. Yuan Chong didn't dare to sleep, and the other guards didn't dare to let their guard down. In the latter half of the night, Qing Jing was so tired that he couldn't help but close his eyes to take a nap. If it was any other day, Qing Jing would have a dreamless night until dawn, but today was different. Dreams came one after another. Rather than calling them dreams, they were more like memories of childhood, adolescence, and youth. Most of them were experiences that left a deep impression on him. However, Qing Jing felt that the dreams were a little strange. For no reason, there was an unknown person beside him. Who was this person? In the dream, Qing Jing was puzzled. Looking at the figure, it should be a woman. A fragrant wind lingered around her, and her footsteps swayed gracefully. An ethereal voice rang in his ears, "She's your lord, your benefactor, your best friend. She's someone you can never betray." Qing Jing was sleeping soundly, but his brows were furrowed, and he kept resisting the voice in his heart. What nonsense! When the carriage was filled with a hazy light, Qing Jing slowly woke up, and his 5 senses gradually returned to him. Just as he was about to get up, his head felt like it was going to explode. "Heng Shu!" he called out. In the next second, the curtain of the carriage was lifted, and Yuan Chong bent down to enter. "Any news?" Yuan Chong knew what Qing Jing was asking about, and he said guiltily, "I'm ashamed, and I've learned something." "Forget it. After a short rest, we'll continue our journey." Qing Jing's brows were furrowed, and his fingers subconsciously rubbed his temples. He said hoarsely, "Finish this as soon as possible, so that the Lord doesn't have to wait for too long. She's your lord, your benefactor, your best friend. She's someone you can never betray." Not only in his dreams, but even when he was awake, the voice rang in his ears like a ghost. Qing Jing didn't tell Yuan Chong about these details. Instead, he stared at the mark on his right hand, and there was a hint of ruthlessness in his eyes. On the other side, the person who had been stabbed by Qing Jing was also full of anxiety. Because Qing Jing was a scholar, his sword was always sheathed at his waist. She had been careless for a moment, and did not expect Qing Jing to be so vigilant, stabbing her without warning. Fortunately, she had the system portable space and escaped quickly, or else she would have been caught red-handed. System, the loyalty talisman should have been planted, right? The system said, the planting was successful, but Qing Jing is tenacious and cautious, so the loyalty talisman can't take effect immediately. We can only slowly grind it out. Ordinary people lacked judgment and were easily deceived. The loyalty talisman usually took effect immediately when used on them. If they encountered someone with a high IQ, the success rate would plummet to less than half. Chapter 841. Since that night, Qing Jing and the others had not encountered any other disturbances, but Yuan Chong's frown had not disappeared. He found that Qing Jing's complexion was getting more and more haggard by the day. Recently, he had even been a little absent-minded. Every time he asked, the other always said he was fine, but Yuan Chong always felt uneasy. He felt that his master was probably being haunted by something evil. But every time he said that, he would always be met with comments like, "Men don't speak of strange powers," which made Yuan Chong feel depressed. In the blink of an eye, it was mid-June. Along the way, Qing Jing and the others saw the new atmosphere of Wanzhou in full swing and could not help but feel emotional. Yuan Chong said, "Although the magistrate of Wanzhou is a woman, she is governing the county well. The north had suffered from war and there were many refugees. Last year, there had been a drought for several months. It should have been very bleak, but what they saw was completely different from what they had imagined. Many people worked hard in the fields. The cultivated fields were scattered in picturesque disorder, presenting a peaceful atmosphere. Qingjing did not say anything. In his opinion, as a ruler, governing the people and treating his subordinates depended on one's ability. It had nothing to do with gender. Not long after Qingjing and the others entered Wanzhou, Jiang Pingji found out. When they arrived, she was already ready to welcome them. "Master, you say this is really Xiangyang district?" "I can't tell at all. If you say this is Shangjing, some people will believe you." "Master, you said that Lu Shi is the magistrate of Wanzhou. Why is he here instead of staying in the prefecture?" As the saying goes, clothes make the man, while horses make the saddle. Yuan Chong, this tall and sturdy man, changed out of his coarse hemp clothes and put on a fine silk robe. He looked a bit more noble and less boorish. He chattered in Qingjing's ear, his power comparable to dozens of ducks. Qingjing frowned. Silence. As soon as he said that, Yuan Chong stopped talking as if his mouth had been sewn shut. He watched Qingjing walk past him, a bit of worry appearing in the depths of his eyes. Recently, Qingjing's temper had been rising. He was still elegant and dignified, but his temperament had become gloomy and violent. What puzzled Yuan Chong was that they had met the woman a few days ago, but this time, Qingjing had asked her to stay. It was too strange. What worried him more was the master's hand. The black lines on his right hand had not disappeared. The teacher's temper seemed to have worsened from that night. Yuan Chong watched as Qingjing walked away. He turned to the guard and asked, "Did that woman do anything strange today?" The guard also lowered his voice and said, "That woman is very obedient. There's nothing noteworthy about her." Yuan Chong suppressed his impatience and hurriedly followed Qingjing's footsteps. Qingjing and his party were envoys representing Huang Song's forces, so Wanzhou did not dare to slight them. This was the first time the transmigrator had visited Wanzhou. She glanced at the surrounding buildings with disdain and muttered to herself, "Country bumpkin." It was only after she disparaged the buildings in Xiangyang district that she stopped talking, feeling like she hadn't had enough. The system poured cold water on her. "Don't get carried away. This is Lu Shi's territory." The transmigrator lowered her eyebrows in displeasure and muttered, "She was hit by the grade 9 loyalty talisman, and the talisman was imprinted on her hand." The system said, the talisman was indeed in Lu Shi's hands, but Lu Shi is similar to Qingjing, so he has a certain resistance to the loyalty talisman. The time traveler proudly said, "So what if you have resistance?" Qingjing is also very powerful, but he was still controlled by the loyalty talisman. If she wasn't controlled by the loyalty talisman, why would Qingjing accept her and let her follow the convoy? Lu Shi was hit by the grade 9 loyalty talisman, and it was the highest quality, orange. There was no way he could escape the fate of becoming a puppet. As long as I activate the incantation of the grade 9 loyalty talisman in front of Lu Shi, she can live or die if I want her to. The system was about to refute. It felt that Lu Shi was not easy to deal with. However, the grade 9 loyalty talisman was indeed powerful. It should be able to control her. Forget it. Just be careful, lest you fail miserably. The system sighed. It was now counting on its host to turn the tables and hoped that this operation would be successful. The products of the system are always of the highest quality. I have confidence in you. The time traveler patted the system on its back. The system felt bitter but could not speak. The host had confidence, but it did not. It had suffered a few setbacks at the hands of Jiang Pingji, the evil opponent, and it still had lingering fears. Qingjing was Huang Song's messenger, and Huang Song and Jiang Pingji were good friends. Jiang Pingji had to meet him personally. "I hope you have been well since we parted ways in Qinzhou, Yumo." May I know the reason for your visit today? Jiang Pingji's attire was more formal than usual. She sat at the head of the table with a dignified air. Qing Jing bowed and said, "My lord heard that you broke through Jiamen Pass, crushed the emperor's morale, and boosted the court's prestige. He sent me to congratulate you with a generous gift." Jiang Pingji looked at Qing Jing with a smile and said, "It's just a small matter. I'm really sorry that Bogeo had to send a gift. Besides, Bogeo and I are best friends, and I've admired your talent for a long time. Now that we've met, we don't have to be so serious." Her eyes fell on Qing Jing's right hand, but she quickly looked away. Qing Jing said, "Etiquette cannot be ignored." "I'll feel uncomfortable if you're always so restrained," Jiang Pingji said. "What's wrong with your hand?" Qing Jing's right hand was covered in black lines. To avoid looking unsightly, he wrapped it with a white strip of cloth. Hearing Jiang Pingji mention his right hand, Qing Jing subconsciously covered the back of his right hand with his left. "I accidentally hurt the back of my hand. Thank you for your concern. Mister's painting skills are peerless, you should be more careful. I have some good scar-removing medicine here. Why don't you take some back?" Qing Jing thanked him. After the small talk, Qing Jing quietly changed the topic to the Battle of Jiamen Pass. The general who guarded the pass was Fu Wang, the top general of the Mengs in Zhangzhou. It was unexpected that such a majestic and ever-victorious general had been defeated by Jiang Pingji. There were reports of the battle, but the details were not complete. It was better to ask the person in question. The Battle of Jiamen Pass was over, and Jiang Pingji had no secrets. She answered Qing Jing's questions. She knew why Qing Jing was here, so she let him lead the conversation. Before long, Qing Jing mentioned the forces in Wulong County that had been destroyed by Fu Wang. "I heard that the Wulong County chief's orphan was rescued by you." Qing Jing sounded like he was asking, but he was sure of it. "Yes. The orphan of County Chief Kai is with me. I remember the child was called Kai Xiang. Why did Yumo bring him up?" Qing Jing sighed. "You may not know this, but ever since County Chief Kai sacrificed his life for the country, Wulong County has been in chaos. There's no leader, and there's been internal strife. Some people even rebelled. The people are so anxious that they had to move their families to seek refuge. On the way from Haozhou, I saw countless people from Wulong County travel thousands of miles to Wanzhou in search of a place to live. It's their fortune that you're willing to take them in, but the journey is dangerous and there are many bandits along the way. Many people have fallen victim to them. It's a pity." Jiang Pingji knew that the refugees from Wulong County had come to Wanzhou, but she couldn't show it. She pretended to be surprised. "Is that true? Xiaoyu, why didn't you tell me?" Su Ku, the professional scapegoat, was speechless. "Please don't drag me into the act, okay?" However, as a subordinate, he had to share his lord's worries. He could only silently take the blame and apologize. Chapter 842. Jiang Pingji said shamefully, "I took Kai Xiang in with good intentions. I didn't expect it to backfire and bring disaster to Wulong County." She pretended to reproach herself. Of course, everyone present was smart enough to know that she was just being polite. Kai County Chief's power was almost destroyed. He only had a few dozen confidants and an 11-year-old boy left. What could they do? If Jiang Pingji didn't take him in, even if Kai Xiang and the others could return to Wulong County, they would only be cannon fodder. If he stayed in Jiang Pingji's territory, he could at least keep his life. Qing Jing said, "You're kind and generous. You protected the only bloodline of Kai County Chief. I heard that Kai Xiang was the only child that Kai County Chief had found when he was in his middle years. If Kai County Chief could see you in heaven, he would be grateful to you. However, the situation in Wulong County is getting worse and the people are suffering. If Kai Xiang could go back and take charge, he might be able to help. Qing Jing's words were exactly what Jiang Pingji wanted. On the surface, she frowned as if she was considering Qing Jing's suggestion. After a while, she said, Yumo, I've thought about it. A few days ago, Kai Xiang sent someone to complain to me. He said that he dreamed of his father and his hometown. The child was only 11 years old, but he suffered such a misfortune. It was heartbreaking. However, Kai Xiang only has a few dozen confidants. If he goes to Wulong County with such a small number of people, wouldn't he fall into the hands of evil people? Qing Jing's eyelids twitched when he heard the last sentence. Jiang Pingji was scolding him indirectly. He pretended not to understand. His expression remained the same, and no one could see any flaws in his act. Qing Jing suggested, I have something to say, but I don't know if I should say it. Yumo, you and I are old friends. What can't we talk about? Jiang Pingji didn't put on the airs of a governor. Instead, she acted as if she was receiving a friend. Her attitude was casual but not rude. Qing Jing closed his eyes and nodded slightly. Why don't you lend some troops to Kai Xiang and help him quell the rebellion? His words sounded like he was considering for Jiang Pingji, but in fact, it was a test. He conveniently blocked her way out. Jiang Pingji saved County Chief Kai's orphan and earned the reputation of being kind and generous. If they were to use this as an excuse to encroach on Wulong County, wouldn't that be bullying an orphan with no one to rely on? If she were to swallow her pride and help Kai Xiang stabilize Wulong County, then withdraw her army and be a selfless Lei Feng, handing over a piece of fat meat, the outside world would praise her to the heavens, saying that she was a model of kindness and loyalty, and would want nothing more than to give her silk banners. Only a fool would do such a thing if he were to contribute manpower, money, and effort. Jiang Pingji thought to herself, I don't mind borrowing troops, but I'm afraid of rumors spreading that I'm trying to encroach on Wulong County and bully the widows. It was really hard to explain. But if we ignore it, the people of Wulong County will continue to suffer. I can't bear to do that. Qing Jing understood Jiang Pingji's hint and could not help but feel happy. As long as she was not interested in Wulong County, then the most suitable person to take over Wulong County was Huang Song. What Qing Jing needed to do now was to recommend Huang Song to Jiang Pingji. Of course, both sides were well aware that Wulong County was not a piece of fat meat for free. If he wanted Jiang Pingji to relent and give up this benefit, he had to offer something else in exchange. What followed was a tug-of-war of negotiation. Jiang Pingji tested Qing Jing's bottom line step by step, while Qing Jing tried his best to fight for Huang Song's benefit. To put it simply, Kai Xiang was a commodity in Jiang Pingji's hands. She wanted to sell him for a high price, and Qing Jing was representing the buyer, Huang Song. Naturally, they had to lower the price. As for what Kai Xiang, the commodity, thought, that was not within their scope of consideration. Jiang Pingji kept the live stream open, and the audience listened to the two of them haggle back and forth. Although their words were reserved, their meaning was the same. The more the audience listened, the more their worldview shattered. Bao Bao Xinku, I have a question. When the streamer and Qing Jing traded Kai Xiang, did Kai Xiang's father know? Terminal obsessive-compulsive disorder patient, Kai Xiang's father was hacked to death by Fu Wang a long time ago. How would he know? Shuyan Fang Mian, I sympathize with Kai Xiang. He's only 11 years old. In our world, he's still in the 6th grade. But considering the streamer's world background, 11 years old is already a sensible age. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame Kai Xiang for being born in the wrong era and being born in the wrong body. He has no ability, no one to rely on, and can only be at the mercy of others without any ability to resist. Zenmodo, the previous poster is too emotional. Things aren't that bad. Huang Song just wants to use Kai Xiang as a puppet to legitimately take over Wulong County. After the deed is done, he probably won't make things difficult for Kai Xiang. After all, Huang Song is also a person who cares about his reputation. In order to shut the mouths of the public, he won't kill Kai Xiang. What's so difficult about rewarding him with a meal? At most, his standard of living will not be as good as before. Zhoucua Gongshou, I'll give the previous poster a like. You've spoken my mind. Kai Xiang has lost his father and protection. If Wulong County is in his hands, even if Huang Song doesn't take it from him, it'll be taken by someone else. Although this is not the right thing to say, it's a chaotic world that only cares about strength and not feelings. Wulong County is a hot potato for Kai Xiang. If he doesn't move, he'll get himself killed sooner or later. Bahuobeo, sigh, Kai Xiang is being sold off by the black-hearted streamer. Although both sides are well aware of the situation, some things can't be said too openly. At the very least, there needs to be a cover. For example, in this transaction of Kai Xiang, Jiang Pingji and Qing Jing stood on the moral high ground. With the people of Wulong County as the starting point, they let Kai Xiang go back to take charge of the overall situation and stabilize the situation. It was definitely not for the benefit of Wanzhou and Huang Song. After some probing, Jiang Pingji had more or less figured out the ins and outs of Huang Song's side. Qing Jing also calculated Jiang Pingji's bottom line. Huang Song knew Jiang Pingji's temperament. This time, he was prepared to bleed a lot. The conditions he offered were quite generous. It was a win-win situation. The negotiation process was quite pleasant, and both sides enjoyed themselves to the fullest. After negotiating a big deal, Jiang Pingji happily set up a banquet to welcome Qing Jing. By the way, Yumo, have you met any strange people recently? Jiang Pingji suddenly asked. Qing Jing's heart skipped a beat, but his expression did not change. Why do you say that, magistrate? Jiang Pingji said casually, Zixiao is proficient in astronomical phenomena and can predict. A while ago, he wrote me a letter saying that an ominous purple cloud was drifting from the south to Wanzhou. The evil aura was getting stronger by the day, so it should be evil without a doubt. As the saying goes, demons are bound to appear in chaotic times. Although strange powers and gods can't be trusted, Zixiao is the person I trust the most. I'd rather believe what he says than not. Chapter 843. Jiang Pingji denied it. That's not what I meant. Umo is like a cool breeze and bright moon. Ordinary demons can't get close to him. I'm just worried that there are demons lurking around you. You'd better be careful. Jiang Pingji's gaze drifted over Qing Jing's right hand. Qing Jing noticed this detail, and his expression changed abruptly. His face, which was already pale in the first place, turned slightly green. There was no one around. Qing Jing walked beside Jiang Pingji. They were only one step apart. Governor, do you also believe in demons and evil? Qing Jing asked tentatively. Jiang Pingji said, the world is vast and full of strange things. Maybe there really are demons and evil. But I've always believed that demons and evil are afraid of humans. Qing Jing said, oh, in surprise. He found it refreshing. He had never heard such a point of view. Since ancient times, only humans were afraid of demons and evil. Why would demons and evil be afraid of humans? Jiang Pingji continued, the theory of demons and evil has been around for a long time. But the strange thing is that the rumors about demons and evil are all groundless. There has never been a convincing conclusion or evidence. I think, if demons and evil are really as strong as people say, why do they hide behind humans and dare not show themselves? It's obvious that demons and evil are afraid of humans. That's why they hide like rats in the gutter. They can't see the light. Qingjing said with a smile, Governor, your words are novel. The demons and evil in the world aren't scary. What's scary is the human heart. I'm afraid that all the Buddhas in the world can't purify the evil in the human heart. Jiang Pingji was implying something. Although Qingjing didn't express his opinion, his expression showed that he agreed with this point of view. At that moment, Qingjing stretched his right hand out of his long sleeve, revealing his palm that was wrapped in white cloth. From the outline of his slender knuckles, Qingjing's hand was very beautiful. It was indeed a pair of hands that could splash ink and paint. He asked, in your opinion, is the demon and evil that Mr. Wei Ci mentioned a human or a demon? Jiang Pingji said, it's hard to say. It depends on what Yumo thinks. Qingjing responded in silence. His frowning brows showed some worry. He could feel that as time went by, his actions were becoming more and more abnormal. His memory was also seriously confused. Although it didn't affect his business, judging from Yuan Chang's reaction, his temperament had changed quite a bit. Countless times, he had wanted to kill the evildoer who was lurking around him, but when he thought of the other party's strange supernatural powers, he could only endure it. I thought that it should be a demon. Qingjing's mind turned and he asked, does Mr. Wei Ci know how to exterminate a demon? Jiang Pingji laughed and said, with Xixiao's mediocre martial arts, he thinks it's too little meat to feed a demon. You asked the wrong person. Qingjing, mocking her subordinates behind her back, such a lord. He really did not know how Wei Ci and the rest could tolerate it. Damn it. Jiang Pingji continued, however, if Yumo wants to know how to eliminate demons, you can ask me. Qingjing had a suspicious look on his face. Then, he thought of something and his expression changed subtly. He remembered the magnificent feat of the man before him. During the rescue of the emperor, Qingjing did not have the right to accompany Huang Song to court. According to Huang Song's account, the magistrate of Wanzhou in front of him had single-handedly dismembered something that seemed to be a demon. With such tyrannical strength, it was no wonder that she said she was not afraid of demons and evil. Qingjing's heart was stirred. He was a little tempted but also a little hesitant. What good plan does the magistrate have? When he asked this question, Qingjing's expression froze slightly. This should be the question of a ruler asking his subordinate. As a strategist, it was really embarrassing for him to ask Jiang Pingji instead of thinking of a good plan. But since he had already said it, he could only brace himself and wait for the answer. Jiang Pingji said with a smile, do you still need to ask? Of course, it's to lure the other party out and kill it on the spot. Qingjing frowned and looked at Jiang Pingji with slight hesitation. Is what you said true, magistrate? Absolutely true. Qingjing thought of Jiang Pingji's magnificent feat, and his wavering heart gradually calmed down. Maybe, he could give it a try. The banquet would only start in the evening. Qingjing first went back to his resting place to shower and change his clothes. As soon as he finished cleaning up, he noticed that there was one more breath in the room. The air was filled with the faint fragrance of cosmetics. He was born in a gentry family. Incense was an elegant thing, so he was quite knowledgeable about it and was more sensitive. He really didn't know how that demon did it. She could always appear by his side without him noticing. After mentally preparing himself, Qingjing walked past the person with a calm expression. He took out his scholar's sword and hung it on his waist. The person said to him in a commanding tone, bring me to the banquet later. Qingjing nodded in response. He didn't show a trace of surprise, as if it was a very normal scene for the other party to appear out of nowhere. How is Lu Shi's condition today? Is there anything strange? The person spoke rather bluntly, as if he really treated Qing Jing as his confidant. He sat at the head of the table as if there was no one else around. Qing Jing closed his eyes and sat upright on the right side of the seat. He was about to speak when his gaze fell on his right hand. He suddenly thought of something and his heart palpitated. Qing Jing said, "There's nothing strange about Magistrate Lu. The only strange thing is, her right hand seems to be injured." He remembered that Jiang Pingji's right hand was wrapped in white cloth, just like his. But at that time, his mind was in a mess and he forgot to ask. Now that he thought about it, Qing Jing felt a chill run down his spine. Could it be that the demon in front of him not only wanted to control him, but also Magistrate Lu? Right hand. The person's eyes lit up, and his entire face became a little more spirited. What does her right hand look like? Qing Jing said, "Magistrate Lu's right hand is wrapped in white cloth. It's a little swollen." After hearing that, the person revealed a satisfied smile. Back then, she had used the level 9 loyalty talisman on Jiang Pingji's right hand. In other words, the curse was on her right hand. Jiang Pingji's right hand was still wrapped. It could be seen that the curse had been hidden in her body for a long time. As long as she activated the curse in front of Jiang Pingji, she would become her most obedient puppet. Thinking of this, she was especially looking forward to the banquet that day. Tonight was the night when the salted fish would turn over. Qing Jing secretly placed his hand on the hilt of his sword. He took a deep breath and calmly got into the carriage. The carriage wheels rolled forward leisurely, heading toward the district headquarters. The person sat in the same carriage as Qing Jing. She even stretched her legs inelegantly and leaned against the seat in a crooked manner. She alone occupied 2/3 of the space in the carriage. Her indecent behavior made Qing Jing's heart burn with anger, but he could only pretend that he did not see it. When they were about to reach their destination, the person ordered Qing Jing, "When the banquet is over, find an excuse to lure Lu Shi out and get her to come see me. If Lu Shi wants to kill me, you must stand in front of me, understand?" The curse had not been activated. Lu Shi was still a demon. She needed someone to be her scapegoat and buy her time. Chapter 844. For a normal banquet, the steps were pretty much the same. Welcoming the guests, announcing the ceremony, starting the banquet, music and dance. To put it bluntly, it was just eating, drinking, playing, and chatting. Qing Jing was preoccupied with his own thoughts, so how could he have the energy to pay attention to the dishes and wine? He had already mentally prepared himself to be distracted while watching the song and dance. At least he could muddle through this difficult period of time. In the end, the customs of Wanzhou's banquets were very different from those of other places. They were given food and drinks, but they weren't allowed to watch songs and dances. Qing Jing couldn't just sit there in a daze, could he? One could say that he was in a daze while watching the song and dance because the song and dance was too beautiful, so he was mesmerized by it. But now, there was only good food and wine, no singing and dancing beauties. If he was in a daze, what excuse could he use? The food and wine were too tempting, so he was dumbfounded. Qing Jing didn't have much of an appetite. Seeing that Jiang Pingji had no intention of summoning him to dance, he could only lower his eyelids and raise his hand to pick up his chopsticks. He had thought that he would lose his appetite after eating a few mouthfuls, but he had never expected that the dishes at the banquet would be so delicious and exquisite that his appetite was aroused. As an honored guest, Qing Jing sat at the first seat on the right side of the hall. Yuan Chong sat at the table beside him. Yuan Chong secretly looked around, as if he was looking for traces of the dancers, but the result was disappointing. More than half of the delicacies on the table had been eaten, but the entertainment program hadn't started yet. Was there a problem with the arrangements? Yuan Chong said with a smile, "Today, there is fine wine and delicacies. If there are beauties singing and dancing to liven things up, it would truly be a joyous occasion." Jiang Pingji said, "I don't keep musicians and dancers in my residence." Yuan Chong would find these words unbelievable if they were said by someone else. Keeping entertainers and dancers was not only for entertainment, but also for the convenience of entertaining guests. Those who didn't raise them were mostly stingy or from poor families. They would lose face if they told others about it. But when Jiang Pingji said it, Yuan Chong felt that it was only natural. The Lu prefecture overseer in front of him was a woman. Why did she keep so many beauties who were more beautiful than her? Making things difficult for me. Yuan Chong thought he knew the truth, so he didn't pursue the matter further. Although there was no singing and dancing to liven things up, the food in Wanzhou was really good. The dishes cooked were exceptionally delicious. Not only did they look, smell, and taste great, but they also had a wide variety of dishes. Even though he was already feeling a little full, he still couldn't help but reach out his chopsticks when he saw the new delicacies that the maidservant had brought over. Today's banquet is to welcome the two envoys. If there were no singing and dancing, it would indeed be a little desolate. Su Ku, who was standing at the side, stepped forward to smooth things over. He said with a smile, "My lord and county chief Huang have a good personal relationship. In private, they address each other as brother and sister. Our two families are naturally as close as one family, so there's no need to be too restrained. If the two envoys don't mind, Ku is willing to play a song." It was the custom of Wanzhou to prepare their own programs. Yuan Chong and Qing Jing thought that they were being rude and had forced Su Ku to come out and smooth things over. But since Su Ku had already said it, how could they dare to say no? Qing Jing said a few words of praise and complimented him in a tone that was neither too light nor too heavy. Su Ku's zither skills were not top-notch, but they were above average. The music he played was cheerful and joyous, so he did not embarrass himself. Yuan Chong couldn't hear anything, he just felt that the other party was playing very well. Everyone brushed this matter aside and continued to eat, drink, and chat. When they were drunk, they would practice their swordplay. Very soon, half of the time had passed. The atmosphere at the banquet was harmonious, causing Qing Jing's taut nerves to relax slightly. However, his gaze would always drift to Jiang Pingji's right hand, and there was a strong sense of struggle in his eyes. He had heard more than once that Lu Shi was good at fighting, and he had also heard Huang's song vividly describe the scene of Lu Shi using a ceremonial tablet to dismember people at court. Even so, Jiang Pingji was still human. Could she really deal with that demon? The demon was obviously plotting against Lu Shi. If he led Lu Shi to the demon, would he really not harm her? Qing Jing was not afraid of anything else, he was only worried that it would bring disaster to Huang's song. While he was hesitating, the banquet had already come to an end. Whether it was the absent-minded Qing Jing, the gourmet Yuan Chong, or the civil and military talents who were freeloading from Jiang Pingji's tent, they maintained an upright sitting posture while secretly covering their stomachs with their sleeves. They rubbed their bloated bellies with the cover of their sleeves. In other people's banquets, listening to songs and watching dances was the main theme, but in Jiang Pingji's banquet, eating and drinking were the most important things. Qing Jing was struggling with himself when Jiang Pingji asked him. "Yumo said that he had something to tell me during the day. What is it?" Jiang Pingji winked at him, hinting at him not to spoil things. Qing Jing was stunned for a moment, but he readily followed her advice. He bowed and said, "My lord ordered me to pass on a message. If it's convenient, I would like to discuss it in detail with you in private." Official matters certainly could not be discussed at the banquet. It was normal to ask for the attendants to be dismissed or to discuss it in detail in private. Jiang Pingji said, of course. The banquet ended, and Qingjing let Yuan Chong return to the place where he was staying. I have something important to discuss with you in detail. Heng Shu, you don't have to wait outside. Just leave a carriage behind. After giving instructions, Qingjing left with Jiang Pingji. The two of them walked under the moonlight to a secluded place, avoiding the eyes and ears of others. From afar, it looked like two friends walking side by side under the moonlight, chatting leisurely. Because the previous banquet was too boring, the audience watching the live stream was not very interested. There were only 2 or 3 comments on the screen. Zhandao Changkong, is there anyone alive in the live stream room? Xianyuan Mingjing, I'm still hanging in there. I've watched the streamer eat for 2 to 3 hours. I'm starving. I'm holding a bucket of instant noodles and gnawing on it. Sai Pu, I'm hanging in there too. I haven't noticed anything strange until now, but I don't dare to leave the live stream room. I'm afraid I'll miss something big. Jiang Pingji's live stream had a certain pattern. If there were no accidents, the live stream time was from 9 to 5. If something big happened, she would extend the live stream time or start a live stream at the last minute. Everyone was a veteran in the live stream room. They knew Jiang Pingji's temper, so they kept waiting and refused to leave. When the banquet was finally over, they saw the streamer strolling under the moonlight with Qingjing in casual clothes. The further they walked, the more remote they became. They felt a little flustered. Could it be that the streamer had finally found her conscience and planned to give the audience some benefits, such as forcing herself against the wall or doing something shameful? More than one person made such a guess. Sans Hisongshu Ningshi, I thought the streamer liked Beauty CI. It was shown in the previous live stream. Why did they suddenly change their CP? Hide and seek cat, I like Beauty CI too. I'm firmly on the streamer X and Wei C's CP, Mei and Yang, change their CP. No. Watching the streamer win over Beauty CI is my motivation to follow the live stream. Don't be so cruel. Turu Feicho, it can't be. Would the streamer fall in love with Qingjing? Don't scare me. You can open your mouth to spread rumors, but you'll break your legs to refute them. Although Qingjing looks good, has a good temperament, and has a good family background, he's much older than the streamer. He should be married and have children, right? It's impossible for the streamer to get involved in other people's marriages and families. She and Qingjing should really have something to discuss. Don't think too much. Chapter 845. Jiang Pingji said, this place is secluded enough. Yumo, just say what you want to say. Qingjing looked at Jiang Pingji helplessly. She was the one who initiated it. How did it turn into him seducing her? What should he say? He had nothing to say. Because of the seal on his hand, Qingjing could sense that the demon was nearby. He became more vigilant. He said, it's a long story. Jiang Pingji said, it's okay. You can make it short. Qingjing was speechless. The audience in the streaming room burst into laughter. Qingjing was Huang Song's counselor, not his own counselor. He shouldn't bully him like that. Fortunately, Qingjing had good mental fortitude. His expression only froze for a moment before returning to normal. His mind raced as he searched for the ink in his stomach. Very quickly, he fabricated a plausible, urgent matter. Jiang Pingji was very cooperative. She either nodded or frowned. Occasionally, she even gave her opinion. Qingjing secretly sighed. The magistrate of Liuzhou was also a talent. His ability to fabricate nonsense was no weaker than his own. They talked as they walked. Jiang Pingji's attention seemed to be attracted by Qingjing's words. The moonlight that was as cold as water shone down, elongating their shadows. They went around a rockery. Their field of view was facing the direction of the moon. In front of them was a dense cluster of abandoned rockery. The shadows were thick. If something was hidden there, no one would be able to find it. As time passed, Qing Jing's heartbeat became louder and faster. It was almost in his throat. He felt a scorching heat on the back of his right hand. He knew that the demon was nearby. She was less than 10 feet away from him. At that moment, he heard a roar. A dark blue light attacked Jiang Pingji from the shadows in front of him. What are you waiting for? Surrender. Everything happened too suddenly. Qing Jing instinctively made a defensive move, trying to block the strange blue light. However, he was just a scholar with weak martial arts skills. By the time he stood in front of Jiang Pingji, the light had already hit her. Qing Jing's face darkened when he saw that. A graceful woman walked out from the shadows of the rockery and clapped her hands in appreciation. You did well. If you didn't help distract Lu Shi and lower his guard, I'm afraid it wouldn't have been so easy. Earlier, the woman had ordered Qing Jing to be her meat shield. Therefore, Qing Jing's actions just now were seen by the woman as proof of his loyalty. Qing Jing secretly sucked in a breath of cold air. With a calm expression, he moved sideways and retreated to the side. However, his hand was placed on the hilt of the sword at his waist. The woman calmly stepped forward and giggled. She circled Jiang Pingji twice and sized her up with a critical gaze. Not bad, Lu Shi. The woman stood in front of Jiang Pingji and suddenly reached out her hand to pinch Jiang Pingji's chin. She used a lot of strength and forced Jiang Pingji to lift her head. You don't look good. You look like a man. Is Lu Shi Lu Shi? Jiang said. I don't. Is. With the help of the moonlight, Qing Jing saw that Jiang Pingji's expression was blank. There were traces of slackness in her eyes, like a piece of wood. His heart thumped fiercely, and the hand that was holding the hilt of his sword tightened. His slender knuckles tightened, revealing a little pale. The woman wasn't satisfied. She pushed Jiang Pingji to the craggy rockery with a vicious look in her eyes. Come. Kneel down and lick my toes. At the side, Qing Jing's arrogant soared. How dare this monster humiliate others like this? Just as he was about to draw his sword, Jiang Pingji waved her right hand at him, signaling him to move away. Qing Jing was speechless. He had met the ancestor of acting. The woman didn't let go. She changed her mind. She looked at Qing Jing, who was watching Jiang Pingji's performance, and curled her finger at him. Come here. Qing. An innocent spectator. Qing Jing was speechless. He took a few steps forward, but his mind was much more relaxed. He wanted to see what kind of show was going to happen next. I'll give her to you today. She's still a virgin. On the other side, the streaming room was in an uproar. The audience had been following the stream for many years. They had never seen Jiang Pingji treated like that. That woman pinched the streamer's chin with her claws, pushed her to the rockery, and made her kneel and lick her toes. Lick your balls. If that wasn't enough, she wanted to humiliate the streamer's body. How despicable. Sai Weiyan, I have a curse that I want to throw in her face right now. Muzhong, is the streamer bewitched? Wake up. The fairy queen's crimson, Qing Jing, if you F** king touch the streamer's finger, I'll crawl along the cable and chop you up. There were only a few comments on the bullet screen, but it exploded in an instant, flooding the screen like a blowout. Then, an orange-yellow bullet screen caught their attention. Host V, I forgot to inform you that I'll be increasing the number of people in the streaming room. According to the plan, the streaming room will be connected to another dimension. When the time comes, I'll broadcast it to the audience in both dimensions. The streaming room has limited seats. Remember to subscribe. The 150,000 viewers were speechless. Their anger was extinguished by Jiang Pingji's notice. Handsome white rabbit, damn it. The drama queen is cheating my feelings. At the same time, Qingjing's face turned green. He was enraged. The evildoer didn't know, but he knew that Jiang Pingji was sober. Lu Shi was the governor of Wanzhou. How could she treat him like an ordinary woman? In Qingjing's opinion, even touching the corner of someone else's clothes was blasphemy, let alone physical humiliation. More importantly, what if the governor of Liuzhou bore a grudge? Qingjing felt his vision darken. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to walk out of Wanzhou. Even if his worldview collapsed, Qingjing still didn't reveal any flaws. To put it bluntly, among the 3 people present, except for the woman, the other 2 were Oscar winners. The Oscars owed them so many little golden figures that they could bankrupt the Oscars. The woman smiled at Jiang Pingji and said, "Look at you, you've been dressing as a man for so many years. I bet you don't even know what a woman is, do you? I'll fulfill your wish today. You've killed me several times in the past. You should have known that this day would come. The river flows east for 30 years and then west for 30 years. The wheel of fortune turns. You've fallen into my hands. This is your retribution. Qingjing, what are you waiting for? I'll reward you." After saying that, the woman pinched Jiang Pingji's chin and threw her toward Qingjing. Qingjing wanted to dodge sideways. He didn't dare touch her, lest the other party came to settle scores with him and get him involved. Jiang Pingji was thrown by the woman like a puppet. Her toes had just left the ground when something happened in the next second. She adjusted her center of gravity in midair and grabbed the woman's wrist. Suddenly, she sank and grabbed the other party. Her right hand was like a spirit snake that wrapped around the woman's neck. With a grab and a lift, she threw the woman from the left to the right. Chapter 846. The woman was caught off guard by the sudden turn of events. Before she could restrain the smugness on her face, she was already under someone else's control. You. Lu Shi, you're not being controlled. Why aren't you being controlled? *TCH, are you trying to trick me? The woman was anxious and helpless. Her heart was pounding in her left chest. She could not help but think of the fear of being controlled by Jiang Pingji. Impossible. You must be being controlled. The woman tried to struggle, but Jiang Pingji was terrifyingly strong. No matter what she did, the woman remained motionless. She was about to go crazy. It's a lie. It's impossible that you're not being controlled. Let me go. Jiang Pingji restrained her and said strangely, "You're so unreasonable. Are you the only one allowed to plot against me, murder me, and control me, but I'm not allowed to defend myself? What kind of rule is that? At the end of the day, it's obvious that your skills are inferior. How can you blame your opponent for being too strong? I suddenly thought of a saying that suits you. You don't have the life of a princess, but you're infected with the princess disease." She directly poked at the woman's weak spot. The woman became angry from embarrassment and struggled even more violently. Jiang Pingji's scolding was too vicious. Qingjing could not help but sneer. His actions reminded the woman. The woman was like a drowning person. She desperately wanted to hold on to the last straw. Flustered and exasperated, she said, "Qingjing, kill her." Jiang Pingji laughed and said, "Yumo's martial arts are inferior to mine. How can he kill me?" The woman said angrily, "Lu Shi, if you kill Qingjing, do you think Huang Song can still maintain his sibling relationship with you? Jiang Pingji tilted her head in surprise. She glanced at the motionless Qingjing and smiled. I thought your brain had been eaten by pigs. I didn't expect you to still have some left. But what's the use of that? I'll give you a piece of advice. Remember it in your next life. Don't think that you're the only smart person in the world. People who think they're smart often die miserably. I won't hurt Yumo, but before you give the order, you have to make sure that he's not being controlled by you. Jiang Pingji's words pierced the woman's spleen and lungs. The woman was so angry that her eyes turned red and overflowed with intense hatred. The woman was panting. Her hair was messy, her cheeks flushed red, and the corners of her eyes shone with tears. Beside him, Qingjing fell silent. If he did not know the cause and effect, he would have thought that Governor Liu was bent like a mosquito coil and was about to destroy a flower. Qingjing. Kill her. Hurry up and kill her, trash. The woman refused to believe it. She couldn't control Lu Shi, but could she not control a stupid ancient man? Qingjing let out a long sigh when his name was called out again. He said to Jiang Pingji, Magistrate of Liuzhou, should I give way? This was said to Jiang Pingji, but it was also a disguised rejection of the woman's order. The slap to the face came too quickly, like a tornado. She said to Qingjing in the tone of a considerate little princess, move aside, move aside. The next scene is too bloody. I'm afraid it'll scare you. Qingjing pretended to be temporarily deaf. He glanced coldly at the demon who was being suppressed by Jiang Pingji and left without any reluctance. The last bit of blood drained from the woman's face. After a while, she said fiercely, Lu Shi, you can't kill me. I will come back for revenge on everyone around you. Jiang Pingji smiled and tightened her grip. She looked at the woman mockingly. The woman's face turned purple because of the lack of oxygen. Her eyes were filled with unwillingness, and her eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. Just as the woman was about to die, Jiang Pingji loosened her grip again. A large amount of fresh air poured into the woman's mouth and nose. She coughed and breathed greedily. The feeling of being on the verge of death but not dying was too terrifying. She did not have the courage to try it a second time. If you have any grudges, come at me. I can at least respect you. You shouldn't have set your eyes on the people around me. Jiang Pingji said with a smile. Her calm voice added some gentleness, but the woman did not feel any warmth. Instead, she trembled all over. The woman trembled and said shakily, I can't die. I will come back. Lu Shi, don't ever let me get the chance. Otherwise, I will make sure you end up like that shameless mother of yours. Just you wait. Jiang Pingji said with a smile, you've already threatened me. Do you think I will give you a chance to rise again? Perhaps it was because she knew she was going to die, the woman regained some calmness. She had the system and countless chances to start over. She could afford to lose. At most, she would continue to owe a huge debt to the system. The woman said crazily, you can't kill me. At that moment, Jiang Pingji moved closer to her ear. Her hot breath hit her earlobe with a burning temperature. Are you sure? The woman's heart skipped a beat. She pretended to be tough and said, if you don't believe me, why don't you try killing me? For her, death was a form of escape. As long as she died, her soul would appear in the system space and she could make a comeback. Jiang Pingji pressed her lips against the woman's ear and said something. The woman's face turned pale and she trembled even more violently. She did not say anything else. She only said one thing. From just now until now, haven't you realized that your biggest backer has not made a sound? System. Right. Why hasn't the system said anything? The woman called out to the system in her heart, but no matter how many times she called out, the result was like a stone sinking into the ocean. There was no response at all. She became more and more flustered. Why hasn't the system responded? Jiang Pingji seemed to know what she was thinking. She said with a smile, the system is not omnipotent. It can't even protect itself now. How can it care about a useless person like you? The woman shook her head in disbelief. Her face was full of fear. She did not care that her vitals were being clamped by Jiang Pingji. She stretched out her well-maintained hands and grabbed the ground. She did not care even if her nails were broken. She just wanted to crawl away. She did not want to be so close to Jiang Pingji. What kind of person could cause the system to be at a loss for what to do? Lu Shi. Spare me, spare my life. The woman's face was covered with tears of fear. The bruises left by the suffocation had not completely faded. Coupled with her shrill screams, she actually had the demeanor of a ferocious ghost. She begged for mercy, please, spare my life. Beg? Isn't it too late now? Jiang Pingji asked her with a smile. Downwind was as mad as a dog. Against the wind, he knelt and begged. Speaking of which, could she have a little backbone? Spare me. I'll tell you a secret. Don't you want to know how your mother, Gu Min, died? The woman cried until her tears and snot dripped down her face. There was no trace of a peerless beauty. She was so embarrassed that she looked like a crazy woman. She said, "Let me go this time. Just let me go this time. I won't go against you anymore. I'll tell you who killed Gu Min." The audience in the streaming room was eating melons with a smile. They felt that today's streaming was not boring. They were waiting for the streamer to kill the demon again. They never thought that it would involve the past of the previous generation. Didn't the streamer's mother die of natural causes? Jiang Pingji lowered her eyelids and sneered. Didn't you kill my two brothers and cause my mother to die of a serious illness? The woman pounded the ground in anger. Her eyes were full of hatred. Chapter 847. Mother and father loved each other very much. Why would father kill her? Please find a good reason to sow discord. The woman's face stiffened. She immediately cried out, "Your mother is a time traveler." A time traveler is someone from another world. Lu Shi thought her body was possessed by evil spirits. How could he not be afraid? If you don't believe me, you can look at Xie Qian. When Xie Qian found out that Wang Huiyun was a time traveler, he also wanted to kill her. I'm telling the truth. If I deliberately sow discord between you and your father, I will die a horrible death. A time traveler. Someone from another world. Jiang Pingji pretended not to know and asked, "Are you telling the truth?" It's absolutely true. The real Gu Min is actually an idiot. Everyone who used to serve Gu Min knows that she didn't know how to speak even when she was 4 years old. The woman called out to the system in her heart. Her voice was trembling as she told the system what she knew. The person who married Lu Shi in the end wasn't Gu Min. It was Gu Min's stepsister, Gu Zhen. That woman was shameless. She took advantage of the fact that she knew the history to steal her own brother-in-law. She even pushed Gu Zhen to Meng Zhan, that bastard. Lu Shi accidentally found out the truth. That's why he planned to assassinate Gu Min. Although I killed your two brothers, I really didn't kill you. Jiang Pingji seemed to be convinced. Although she didn't let go of the woman, she obviously loosened her grip. Go on. Tell me everything you know. The woman realized in despair that she really couldn't contact the system. In order to survive, she could only take a gamble. I also accidentally found out that Gu Min is a time traveler. Later, I searched her soul and found out that she came from 300 years in the future. She knew the history, so she stole Guzhen's husband. She's a shameless B***tch. Lu Shi is an ancient person. Of course, he is afraid of ghosts and gods, so he murdered Gu Min. I'm telling the truth, please don't kill me. Jiang Pingji heard and snorted mockingly. The woman seemed to think of something and hurriedly said, Lu Shi still wants to kill you. In Gu Min's memory, you will kill Lu Shi in the end. Now that he knows about this, it won't be easy for you to kill him in the future. He will kill you in advance. Because of her panic, she spoke incoherently. Jiang Pingji laughed and said, Do you think I will believe you? If my father really wanted to kill me, he would have done so long ago. The woman cried, Because you are the founding emperor of the Jiang dynasty, the future Emperor Qin. Of course, Lu Shi won't let you die now. The founding emperor of the Jiang dynasty. The woman nodded like she was pounding garlic. She said, Yes. The founding emperor of the Jiang dynasty. I searched Gu Min's soul and discovered that she came from the future 300 years ago. Her maiden name was Lanting, but when Lu Lanting was 12 years old, she met bandits and lost her memory. She forgot that she was Lu Lanting and changed her surname to Jiang Pingji. She even killed her own brother. This is what I saw from Gu Min's memory. Later, she killed Lu Shi, who was captured by the feudal vassals. She killed her own father. Seeing that Jiang Pingji was unmoved, the woman continued, Even if Lu Shi doesn't kill you now, he will definitely kill you in the future. Because you're the daughter of a demon, why wouldn't he be afraid? But in order to become the emperor, he has to treat you well. You have to believe me. Jiang Pingji laughed and said, If I really become the emperor one day, do you think my father can still kill me? He didn't do anything to me now, and he won't do anything to me in the future. You sowed discord and urged me to kill my father. You have ulterior motives and evil intentions. The woman's face was twisted. She never expected that she would not be able to persuade Jiang Pingji after so much persuasion. After a while, she said, You asked me before. You asked me if it was because of me that your mother almost died. Jiang Pingji said calmly, I already know the answer to this question. Even if you answer it, it's of no value to me. You know. The woman widened her eyes in surprise. Jiang Pingji nodded. I know. The two looked at each other, and the woman suddenly laughed wildly. She laughed so hard that tears came out of her eyes. Yes, yes, yes. You know. I'm the stupid one. Jiang Pingji said again, Are you done? If you are, prepare to be on your way. The woman's arrogant laughter stopped abruptly. Her eyes widened like copper bells, and the whites of her eyes were horrifying. You want to kill me? Jiang Pingji said faintly, I never said I won't kill you, right? You're the one who thinks too highly of yourself. Her words extinguished the last glimmer of hope in the woman's heart. In your next life, be a good person. Jiang Pingji spoke as if she was chatting with an old friend. In this world, everyone's life is precious. The so-called poverty refers to wealth, not life. You have an advantage that ordinary people don't, but that's not an excuse for you to disregard human life. You think you're lucky enough to get a powerful cheat, but how do you know that the other party doesn't have the intention to harm you? To be honest, Jiang Pingji could not bear to kill her. No matter what, it was a daily pastime. If it was gone, she would be lonely in the future. Forgive me this time. I won't harm you anymore. I really won't harm you. I won't be the heroine. The woman vaguely realized that she did not have the chance to load the file again. Her fear of death overrode everything else. It's too late to say all this now. When you were harming others, did you ever think about this day? Faced with the threat of death, the woman suddenly exerted all her strength to fight, but Jiang Pingji already knew her intentions. Ugh, she stuck out her tongue. The strong feeling of suffocation made her consciousness blur. Her eyeballs were bulging out of their sockets with fine blood vessels. Suddenly, there was a crisp sound of bones breaking. Scarlet blood gushed out from her mouth, nose, eyes, and ears. Her violently struggling body slowly softened. Her eyes were wide open, and she died with a grievance. She looked like a malicious ghost. Where was the charm of a beautiful woman? Jiang Pingji murmured, I wanted to keep you to amuse me, but, who asked you to lay your hands on Qingjing? Up to this day, Jiang Pingji had also miscalculated. Fortunately, the deviation was not big. Everything was still under her control. She thought that by deliberately using the level 9 loyalty talisman, the woman would focus on her and not lay her hands on the people around her. She did not know that the woman was greedy. She tried to control Qingjing. Who knew if she would lay her hands on Wei Ci and the others in the future? A woman who had nothing to lose was not afraid of wearing shoes. Jiang Pingji could not afford to gamble. Considering the risks, she decided to get rid of this hidden danger once and for all. Even if it was not a good time to reel in the net. Using her spirit to disperse the woman's remaining source of spiritual waves, Jiang Pingji's right hand brushed over the woman's body. After a while, another strange source of spiritual waves appeared in her mental brain. It was the subsystem of the woman's body. In order to distinguish Jiang Pingji's and the woman's systems, they were temporarily labeled as System 1 and System 2. Jiang Pingji said mischievously, System, I've sent your brother here. Chapter 848. Ugh, it's not a good habit to swear. Aren't you afraid that you'll lead the children astray? I'll send the system itself over one day, and you can play landlord with 3 people, Jiang Pingji said with a smile. She wasn't affected at all. Instead, the 2 systems were fuming with anger. What landlord? Why didn't you just play mahjong with the 4 of you? System number 2 was still confused. Its connection with the host was cut off by Jiang Pingji, and it watched as she killed the host and scattered the host's soul. This was completely different from the script it had expected. That was not all. Before it could escape, its vision went black and it was locked in a field of spiritual energy. System number 2 asked, Where is this? Jiang Pingji said, My spiritual brain region. She grabbed the system on the time-traveling woman's body. The 2 streaming rooms were forced to upgrade and were currently entering the maintenance phase. Before entering the maintenance phase, she sent a message to the audience in her streaming room, asking them to hurry up and grab a seat the next day. System number 2 tried to break free, but the suppression around it was too strong. It couldn't escape at all. Near it, system number 1, which was a few times smaller than it, said coldly, Stop struggling, stop. System number 2 only realized system number 1's situation at that moment, and it was even more confused. Why are you imprisoned? Because the information between the systems was not interconnected, it still didn't know that its fellow sufferer had suffered inhumane treatment. System number 1 snorted coldly. It didn't want to talk to this idiot. System number 2 calmed down and its heart sank. It felt that the script was completely different from what it had expected. It said hesitantly, This spiritual brain region isn't normal, abnormally strong. System number 1 continued to sneer. You've been with that stupid woman for too long. Even your IQ has been dragged down by her. System number 2 was silent. It thought of a terrible guess. You. How could you possess such a host? You're still helping her. If it had encountered such a ghost, it would have left a long time ago. System number 1 said lifelessly, Which of your dog eyes saw me helping her? It was also a prisoner now, okay? It wasn't worried about anything but the main body of the system. Looking at Jiang Pingji's reaction recently, she seemed to have found out the truth, which made it anxious. As a higher life form, it had never felt so powerless before. Of the hosts it had met in the past, 9 out of 10 were idiots, and 1 was a smartass. Which one of them wasn't fooled by it? Unfortunately, the heavenly axiom was good at reincarnation. This time, the person who was fooled was him. System number 2 was the first to be separated. Once it was separated, it and the main body of the system became 2 separate entities, and there were many things it did not know. It thought it was number 1's idea to look for Jiang Pingji, so it complained, "Why did you find such a host? How was this an enslaved host? It was clearly an ancestor." System number 1 sneered, "If I had a choice, I wouldn't choose it either." Who knew that the chosen one would be so hard to deal with? There were countless planes in the world, and each plane was equivalent to an independent entity. The better the living beings on the plane grew and flourished, the more the plane would receive in return. The so-called system was actually a parasite that traversed the various planes and secretly absorbed their origin energy. Planes also had their own consciousness. In order to let the living beings on the plane develop better, the so-called chosen one came into existence. If the system did not intervene, according to the original trajectory, Jiang Pingji would create a brand new dynasty and give back more benefits to the plane. The result? The small sapling that was the plane had been targeted by the parasite, the system. According to previous experience, as long as the chosen one was killed, and then it absorbed the origin energy of the plane step by step, it would basically be stable. System number 2 screamed loudly, "She's the chosen one." That scared me to death. System number 1 said gloomily, "If she's not the chosen one, why would the main body split me again?" It thought it could bring disaster to the chosen one that the plane favored, but it didn't expect that she was basically a disaster that specialized in harming the system. It really didn't know where the low-level plane, which was still in a backward civilization, could capture such a soul. It was so F***ing disgusting. System number 2 was instantly stunned. It said anxiously, "What do we do now? You and I are the same. If you ask me, who should I ask?" The system was flustered and exasperated. "Can you still contact the main body?" System number 2 said dejectedly, "No." As early as when it was forcibly bound to the previous host's body by Jiang Pingji, it could not contact the main body. At that time, it knew that Jiang Pingji was not to be trifled with, but it never thought that she would be so troublesome. Not only could she threaten it, but she could also threaten the main body. "Just wait." System number 1 panted heavily and said fiercely, "Jiang Pingji is quite conceited. She will fall hard. Fortunately, your stupid host still has some brains and didn't give up the real main body. Otherwise, the main body might also be captured by Jiang Pingji. Then, with 1 master and 2 sons, the 3 systems could play landlord." At that moment, Jiang Pingji's voice sounded in the spiritual brain. She said, "I think both of you are quite stupid. This is my spiritual brain. I am the god here. I can hear whatever you are whispering about. Are you sure you want to continue talking?" Jiang Pingji laughed and teased while destroying the corpse. The 2 systems were as quiet as chickens. Her ears were finally at peace. Sigh. Reincarnate into a good life in your next life. If you still have the chance to be reincarnated, Jiang Pingji clapped her hands. The corpse on the ground had completely ignited. From time to time, there was the sound of an explosion. Qing Jing was guarding from afar. When he saw the fire, he suppressed his emotions and hurried over. "Magistrate Liu, has that demon been executed?" "Yes, Look at your hand. Are the traces still there? Qing Jing was delighted. He raised his hand and removed the white cloth on his right hand. He saw that the area that was originally covered with ugly black lines had returned to its normal color. He solemnly bowed and said gratefully, "Thank you, Magistrate, for saving my life." The black lines disappeared. He felt that his body was a little lighter. His originally dizzy mind seemed to have been dispelled and saw the sun. He was much clearer. Jiang Pingji raised her hand and helped him up. She said with a smile, "You don't have to thank me. This matter is also my fault. I should have gotten rid of her earlier." Qing Jing did not know that Jiang Pingji deliberately left a backup plan to give the time traveler a chance to make a comeback. Speaking of which, if it were not for Jiang Pingji, Qing Jing would not have suffered such an undeserved calamity. Chapter 849. Day's Village, an unknown small place in the Jiang dynasty. There were only 100 families in this village, and it didn't take long for the people at the end of the village to know what happened at the head of the village. Today, the usually quiet village became lively. "This girl's eyes are bright, and I like her. Girl, what's your name?" The iceman was gorgeously dressed, and his clothes were colorful and bright, making people wonder if he was wearing a flower pot. Ning Wanyue timidly said, "My daughter's name is Wanyue." "Wanyue? That's an elegant name. Who named it?" the fat iceman asked. Before Ning Wanyue could answer, the fat auntie on the side answered, "This name was given by the poor father of Wanyue." Since the establishment of the Jiang dynasty, the Empress opened the imperial examinations, and many young people dreamed of reaching the sky in one step. Ning Wanyue's father was one of them. Unfortunately, his talent was not high, and he could only read a few words in the past few years. Not long ago, he was bitten to death by a poisonous snake while working in the field. Wanyue's mother died early, and her father also passed away. The family was penniless, and now they were so poor that they couldn't even feed themselves. Knowing that a noble had come to the village to choose a girl as a child bride, Wanyue's aunt hurriedly brought the little burden out. The iceman asked again, "Can you read?" Wanyue timidly nodded. The iceman turned around and talked with the people accompanying him, and after a while, he decided on Wanyue. Aunt Wanyue happily pushed her out, and turned around to accept the betrothal gift from the iceman. The young and ignorant Wanyue followed the iceman into the carriage, her face full of bewilderment. She didn't know where her future would go with this carriage. Wanyue knew what a child bride was, and several families in the village had also bought a child bride. She thought that her husband was either an old man in his 30s or 40s, or a 3 or 4-year-old urchin. However, after a month, she was suddenly at a loss when she saw the handsome, tranquil young man. Such a good-looking immortal would actually worry about not being able to find a wife. "Why did you send this child here?" The voice was cold, like the tinkling of a clear spring, seeping with a chill. The plain-clothed young man sat under the porch with a zither on the table in front of him. A similarly plain white forehead cloth was neatly placed on his forehead and 2 plain white belts were wrapped around his waist. It was a long morning attire. His eyes swept over Wanyu's face without a trace of emotion. With just a glance, Wanyu was so scared that she took 2 steps back, timidly hiding behind Iceman. The eldest lady said that Grand Tutor Wei should continue the bloodline. Iceman's voice was not as frivolous as before, but with a trace of indifference that was difficult for others to understand. In short, it was very imposing. The young man snorted coldly with a mocking smile on his face. Iceman pushed Wanyue out from behind him. "If Second Langjun is not willing, I will come back in half a year to take this child away." Iceman left, leaving only the moon and a few large and small bags, which contained a lot of gold and silver jewelry and clothes of good materials. The young man continued to play the zither. Wonhua didn't understand what he was playing, but she thought it was beautiful. She stood under the porch and basked in the sun all afternoon, not knowing to find a shady place to hide from the sun. At dusk, the young man returned to the house with the zither in his arms and came out after a while. "What is your name?" The young man handed her a glass of water. Wonhua took it and greedily drank a few mouthfuls, almost choking. "This little one's surname is Ning, and my maiden name is Wonhua." The young man sat under the porch, casually wearing a pair of crudely made wooden clogs. He looked at the petite Wonhua and asked, "How old are you?" 11. The young man murmured, "Only 11 years old." "Ha, this is ridiculous." Wonhua didn't dare to move. Before Iceman came, he had repeatedly ordered her to follow all kinds of rules into her head. The young man said again, "Then do you know what they want you to do?" Wonhua said, "To be Lang Juan's wife." She spoke very bluntly, her eyes dark and clear. After a while, a hand with distinct fingers appeared on Wonhua's head, rubbing her hair. "You're only 11 years old. If I were born 5 or 6 years earlier, you could be my daughter." Wonhua tilted her head and asked anxiously, "Then should I call you Daddy?" The young man was speechless. Forget it, forget it. Why should I get angry with a child like you?" The young man sighed and said, "Just call me Big Brother." Wonhua asked, "Big Brother? Then can Wonhua still be your wife?" The young man laughed. "You're so young. What do you know about a wife?" Wonhua hung her head and twisted her sleeves, not daring to say another word. The young man lived deep in the mountains. It was a beautiful place with beautiful scenery. But for some reason, the young man was a vegetarian all year round, wearing plain clothes as if he was observing mourning for someone. Wonhua lived in a house near the young man and had nothing to do all day. She saw that the courtyard was empty and felt that it was a waste to leave it empty, so she rolled up her sleeves and started weeding. The young man's daily routine was either playing the zither or painting or staring blankly at the sky. Seeing Wonhua like this, his interest was slowly aroused. "What are you doing?" "There's a lot of land outside. Once the weeds are cleared, we can plant cabbages. We'll be able to eat fresh vegetables in the future." The young man tucked his hands in his sleeves and said to Wonhua, "Someone will bring us fresh fruits and vegetables every day. There's no need to grow them ourselves." Wonhua gasped. The young man continued, "What else? Where do you think the food I've been eating these days came from?" Wonhua was even more confused. For the first time, she was extremely curious about the young man's identity. She lived here for a few days and found that the young man's courtyard was very large. But inside and outside, there were only 2 living people, the 2 of them. "Do you think living here is very boring?" The young man carried a zither and found a place to sit on the ground. He played a few times and turned to look at Wonhua. "That's true. This place is very remote and close to the Imperial Mausoleum. Ordinary people wouldn't dare to come close." Only then did Wonhua realize that they were actually living in the back mountains of the Imperial Mausoleum. It's not very boring. I can see Lang Juan every day. I feel like a whole day isn't enough." Wonhua was an honest child. She said whatever she wanted to say, straightforward and pure. "Can you read?" the young man asked her. "I can read a few words." The Empress set a precedent and set up girls' schools in various places. Not only did they teach women how to read, and calculate, but they were also taught self-defense techniques for 4 years. In the Jiang dynasty, if a woman wanted to marry well or to become an independent woman, she had to choose a husband. The young man asked, "Do you want to continue learning? I can teach you so that you don't have anything to do and waste your time." Wonhua nodded heavily, her eyes brightening. She loved to study, but due to a family accident, she only studied for 2 years before returning home. Won Yu's results in the girls' school were good, but compared to the young man beside her, she seemed to be nothing. Chapter 850. Won Yu entered the young man's study and found that the large room was filled with bookshelves stacked with countless books. So many, Won Yu's small mouth opened slightly and forgot to close it for a long time. My father's book collection. The young man's voice had a hint of a smile and a hint of pride. This was the first time Won Yu heard the young man talk about his family. Unknowingly, Won Yu had been here for half a year and the deadline with the Iceman was approaching. Won Yu was so anxious that she couldn't even concentrate on her daily studies and was quickly seen through by the young man. If you don't like learning, then give it up, why force yourself? Listening to Won Yu's messy playing, the young man's face flashed with anger. Won Yu hung her head, dispirited and stammering as she voiced out her worries. Just for this? The young man was surprised. Won Yu said, if Lang Jun doesn't like it, then the Iceman will send me back and then I'll be sold by Auntie again. The young man sat by the zither table, not knowing what to think. I'm afraid that for the rest of my life I'll be neighbors with the mausoleum and never be able to leave. The young man sighed, you're still young, I'll talk to that woman and ask her to help you arrange a marriage. She's the most obedient lackey in the world, obeying the orders of the most powerful person in the world. Won Yu didn't know why the young man wanted to live in seclusion near the mausoleum, but from the looks of it, he had his own reasons as well as external constraints. For more than half a year, the young man's largest area of activity was near the mausoleum and he never spent the night outside, returning as soon as it was dark. But, what if Won Yu covets Lang Jun's looks and no longer likes anyone else? The Jiang dynasty was open, it was common for women to confess their love to men. In the troubled times of 20 or 30 years ago, Won Yu could have married at this age. You're still young. In a few days you'll be 12, in a few years you'll be 18, not young. After rounding it up she would be an adult. Won Yu gathered her courage, she knew that there was no better person in the world than the young man in front of her. The young man was speechless, facing Won Yu who was smaller than him. He didn't say anything. In his eyes she was just a naive child. Won Yu had lived with the young man in the back mountain of the mausoleum for nearly 6 years. In the blink of an eye, she had grown into a slender and elegant beauty. The young man still looked the same, except that his facial features were more mature. Time seemed to have stopped on him. One day, she went out to pick some fruits that she had planted. When she returned home, she found that there were many exquisite carriages and horses outside the courtyard. She nervously moved forward, but was not stopped. Won Yu saw the Iceman from several years ago. He was dressed in a green and white chrysanthemum dress, looking very capable and experienced. Who are you? Won Yu asked anxiously. The other party also looked at her. After a while, he recognized her as the girl from many years ago. The first lady is talking to the second Lang Jun inside. Let's wait here. Iceman nodded and smiled at her, which made Lan Yue even more nervous. The first lady, inside, was that his family? It was strange. Since when you first met the young man, he had always been wearing plain clothes, a plain forehead cloth, and a belt. He even avoided greasy food. If he was mourning for his family, he wouldn't have been mourning for 6 or 7 years, would he? Standing in the corridor, Won Yu relied on her good hearing to faintly hear the conversation in the room. After a few years, have you reflected on yourself? The one who spoke was a woman. Her voice was slightly hoarse, but inexplicably carried a strong aura. The young man sneered. What do I have to reflect on myself? The woman said, even now, you still don't think you're wrong. The young man pursed his lips and said nothing. Won Yu's heart inexplicably tightened. Although she didn't know what happened to the young man's family, she had been with him for many years and often saw regret and frustration in his eyes. The young man's voice rose a few octaves. He said, "You think I'm wrong. Jiang Yan, you've had all the good things in the world. Why is it that even when I'm asking for an explanation, I'm being accused of treason? We're clearly siblings from the same mother. You're powerful, and I'm just the son of a concubine. You've been carefully taught by her, and I've been secretly ridiculed. Jiang Yan, how have I done worse than you? You were born a proud son of heaven, but when I was born, my identity was erased, and I was marked as a dead person. Has she ever asked me how I feel?" Won Yu was frightened like a startled bird. She had known the young man for so many years, but when had she ever seen him so emotional? The woman in the room said calmly, "In the end, it's still hard for you to calm down." "Yes." The young man said, "Would rather accept the imperial edict and commit suicide in front of the palace than live out my days in this mausoleum's back mountain." The woman sighed. "I thought that since you've lived here for so long, you should be able to calm down and reflect on the situation back then. The Grand Tutor has high hopes for you, and Mother has high expectations for you, but you only know how to throw a tantrum. Ask for an explanation. The price of asking for an explanation is simply too heavy." The young man didn't answer, but the sound of something heavy falling came from the room, as if someone had thrown something on the table to the ground. "Jiang Yan, it's easy for you to say. She's never looked me in the eye, not even once." If he didn't know the truth, the young man could still muddle along. No matter what, he was the only son of the Grand Tutor of the current Crown Princess. Even though he was Ting Chia's bastard son, he could still live a happy life. However, the truth was cruel. He was actually the son of the Emperor, and back then, he was posthumously conferred the title of Crown Prince Zhongzhua. Two identities, one earth, the other heaven. He couldn't calm down. Why did he have to be stripped of his identity at birth? Since he was to be despised and abandoned at birth, he might as well not have been born at all. They were of the same mother, but their treatment was so different. At that time, he was indeed naive and ignorant, deceived by others. He actually suspected that his biological father wasn't his biological father, but a villain who had secretly stolen the crown prince. He mistakenly thought his biological father was his enemy. Later, he found out that the person who had stripped him of his identity was none other than the sovereign of the 9 and 5. Before he could recover from such a huge truth, one blow after another came crashing down on him, causing him to see stars. His biological father insisted that he was impersonating Crown Prince Zhongzhua, and before he could refute, he pulled out his sword and committed suicide. When the young man received this news, his vision darkened. He felt as if the world had collapsed, and he couldn't hear anything else. His biological mother, who was said to have passed away, woke up again. Under the terrified gazes of the civil and military officials, she methodically cleaned up a bunch of rebels. Those who should be arrested were arrested, and those who should be killed were killed. Those who were arrogant and complacent not long ago were all sent to prison, but he, the mastermind, was left to the side, and he didn't even look at him. Even when his biological mother really passed away due to a critical illness, he still didn't receive any word about his punishment. He was actually like a clown, ignored to this point. "You didn't look at me properly." The woman smiled. "So, that's what you think. Then, do you want to hear what I have to say?" Chapter 851. The woman said, "You must have investigated the past since you're living here, right? Don't deny it. I know better than you what books are in the study. The world is unstable, and there are many contradictions in the court. Mother spends 14 to 16 hours a day busy with court affairs. You can follow the Grand Tutor into the palace and see her a few times a year. What about me? When you're tired of studying, you throw a tantrum and refuse to learn. The Grand Tutor patiently coaxes you, but what about me? I can only be accompanied by books, and I can't finish learning every day. In my spare time, I'm even taken to the common people to experience their situation. I've been a dock laborer, learned to beg on the streets, and hid in the countryside to investigate the people's situation. Wait, Song, can I hate you too? I don't even dare to fall sick. Other than the maids, no one is by my side. When you're slightly ill, the Grand Tutor stays up all night watching over you. Mother is so busy that she even grabs the imperial physician for questioning. Wait, Song, you live a relaxed and happy life, but have you ever thought about the suffering of others? Outside the room, Wanyue listened with worry. Mother also said before she passed away that she regretted letting you live too comfortably. That's why she had so much time to think. The Grand Tutor feels guilty for spoiling you too naively. Just a mere rumor can make you feel uneasy. Tell me, other than the throne, what do you have that makes you feel uneasy? The woman continued, Mother fought for the world. You're only her son, not her. She can give the world to whoever she wants. So what if you're her son? Must she leave the world to you? The youth couldn't bear it any longer. I never wanted the world. I only hoped that she would acknowledge me, that I could properly call her mother, and that I could be recorded in the genealogy. But everyone told me that I was only a disgrace to her. He was young and insensible, and he was used as a sharp knife to stab his loved one in the chest. How could he want this? He watched over the coffin for 12 years. Did she really think that he was an unfilial son and wasn't sad at all? You're recorded as a legitimate son in the Wei family genealogy, the woman said. In the genealogy, the legal wife next to the Grand Tutor is Lu Lanting. The youth didn't recover for a moment. Back then, Mother only wanted to have one child. However, she was concerned about the Grand Tutor, so she took the risk to give birth to you. Her original intention was for you to accompany the Grand Tutor and inherit the Wei family. The woman suddenly said, in front of others, I can only call him Grand Tutor. I also want to properly call him father. The young man was speechless. Forget it. It's all history from more than a decade ago. I didn't come here today to talk nonsense with you. The woman said, it's about time for you and Ning Wanyue to get married. As your older sister, I should send you a congratulatory gift. If you and her descendants can be of great use, I will pardon them and allow them to enter the imperial court. If you think it through, send someone to let me know. If you haven't figured it out, you can continue to be the guardian. Before his mother passed away, she had left behind a posthumous edict that punished Wei Tsong to guard the coffin for 12 years. Now, the time limit was up. This was the first time Ning Wanyue saw Wei Tsong's older sister, Jiang Yan, for the last time. Upon seeing the other party, Ning Wanyue hurriedly greeted him. The other party stood by her side and said, take good care of him for us. Don't spoil him too much. We. Ning Wanyue's eyes widened in fright. By the time she regained her senses, the other party had already left, leaving behind only countless betrothal gifts and dowry. Lang Jun. Your older sister. The young man's face darkened. He was in a very bad mood as he plucked the zither from time to time. Call me Fusho. I want to hear someone call me that again. The young man had a name. His surname was Wei, and his given name was Kong. His courtesy name was Tingzhang. He was one of the people involved in the once sensational Crown Prince Zhang Zhua case. Fusho. Before Ning Wanyue could finish, the young man said hoarsely, she won't come again. You should also leave. You want to drive me away. Ning Wanyue tugged at her sleeves and bit her lower lip. That's right. How can my identity be worthy of you? How could she have imagined that the young man, who wore plain clothes all year round, was actually a member of the imperial family? Ning Wanyue was just a country girl. Even though she had studied with the young man for several years, she was still lacking something. To put it bluntly, she didn't look like a crown prince when she wore a dragon robe. The young man plucked the zither in silence. After a while, he said, "Your life will be so boring if you follow me." Ning Wanyue said, "I've lived here with you for 6 years. Have you ever heard me say that it's boring?" The young man was distraught. He put the zither to the side. "Shout for me again." Ning Wanyue had thought that there was no hope. After hearing his words, she hesitated and called out, "Fusho." The young man said, "When I was young, I made a huge mistake. Even though I guarded the coffin for 12 years, I still couldn't erase the wound in my heart." Ning Wanyue said, "Since you're so remorseful, why did you talk back to that lord just now?" The young man didn't answer. He was afraid that if he admitted defeat, even the last family member who was willing to pay attention to him would ignore him. He had guarded the coffin here for 12 years and had only seen his older sister twice in total. The first time was when he had just been sent to the back mountain of the Imperial Mausoleum. The second time was today. He was a commoner, while the other party was the Emperor sitting on the dragon throne. If the other party didn't think of him, he wouldn't even be able to enter the Imperial City, let alone see her. "There are some things you don't understand." The young man hung his head, half of his face buried in the shadows. Ning Wanyue really didn't understand. The young man continued, "She's still patient with me. I can beg her to bestow you a good marriage." No matter what, she was a student taught by the young man. In terms of talent and learning, few noble ladies in the imperial city could compare to Wanyue. If she had a good identity, she would definitely be rich for the rest of her life. Ning Wanyue was originally sad, but when she heard the young man's words, she suddenly laughed. The young man asked, "What are you laughing at?" Ning Wanyue said, "I just feel that there's still hope for me to stay by your side. If you don't care about me, why bother using the word beg? I've been with you for many years, but I've never seen you use such a word. Now that you're willing to use it for me, it shows that I still have some weight in your heart. Tell me, shouldn't I be happy for myself?" The young man was speechless. Ning Wanyue said, "I'm just a country girl, but now that I have the chance to tie the knot with you, I can't be more than happy." The young man looked at Ning Wanyue and faintly understood why Jiang Yan's confidant chose her and sent her to his side. "Fusho, is your sister really Her Majesty?" Ning Wanyue rested her cheeks on her hands. Her cheeks were flushed, and her eyes were sparkling. It was said that both empresses were wise rulers who loved the people like their own children. Especially the current empress, who was honest and loved the people. When the empress ascended to the throne, she swore to follow her mother's example and never got married. Although she never got married, she gave birth to a daughter a few years ago. Her biological father's identity was still unknown. However, the people were more concerned about achievements and didn't pay much attention to the emperor's private life. When Ning Wanyue was young, she often heard her father talk about the achievements of the two emperors. Her father was born in troubled times, and he admired the two emperors the most. In her father's words, an emperor who could let the people live a good life was a good emperor. As for the disputes in the imperial court, they were too far away from the common people. Under her father's influence, Ning Wanyue was also a die-hard fan of the Empress. The young man saw her blushing cheeks and thought of his biological sister's appearance, and he felt inexplicably suffocated. Ning Wanyue asked him, "Does Fusho still have to keep vigil here?" The young man said, "Mother. The former Empress punished me to keep vigil for 12 years. At first, I wanted to leave at all times, but now I don't want to. Ning Wanyue asked doubtfully, because the knot in Fusho's heart hasn't been resolved. Or is it because the 12 years haven't passed? The time limit is up. Otherwise, why would Her Majesty condescend to come all the way here? The young man spoke insincerely. He clearly looked forward to this day. He occasionally knew how busy this imperial sister was from the books in the market. She wasn't as leisurely as his mother back then, and it wasn't easy for her to take the time to make such a trip. I just don't want to leave. Ning Wanyue said, Why? I'm afraid you don't know. If I hadn't been too stupid back then and made a huge mistake. How could the former Empress have died so early? Ning Wanyue somewhat disagreed. She said, but I heard. I only heard father mention that the former Empress's health wasn't very good, and she had the intention of abdicating the throne back then. I think, with the former Empress's temperament of being responsible for the people, she wouldn't have easily abandoned her heavy burden and let Her Majesty succeed the throne unless it was something beyond her control, right? Perhaps the former Empress's health really wasn't good back then and she wanted to abdicate the throne. What she said next might touch the young man's sore spot, so Ning Wanyue didn't dare to continue. The young man said, just continue. Ning Wanyue scratched her head and said, this. I'm thinking, maybe the former Empress's condition wasn't good back then, so she wanted to unload her burden and take a good look at her empire. The former Empress sacrificed most of her life to end the chaotic era. It would be a pity if she didn't take a good look at her empire. The young man looked at Ning Wanyue silently. Since your period of vigil is up, why don't you walk around and take a look at the former Empress? Your painting skills are excellent. You can draw it. Ning Wanyue originally wanted to persuade the young man to let go of the knot in his heart, but when she saw his slightly red eyes, she didn't know how to continue. Let me lean on you. I'll be fine in a while. The young man leaned on her shoulder and didn't say anything for a long time. Night fell outside. The young man restrained his emotions and got up to open the boxes placed in the corner of the study. There were a total of 16 boxes, and they were neatly stacked. Ning Wanyue had never seen him open any of the boxes in the past few years. These are my father's brushes and ink. The young man opened the boxes one by one. Ning Wanyue could still smell the fragrance of the ink on them. After they were unfolded, a magnificent scene appeared in front of her eyes. She finally knew where the young man learned his exquisite painting skills from. He rarely painted people. Most of his paintings were landscape paintings. When I looked at his paintings in the past, I always felt that he had a knot in his heart. Now that I look at it again, I realize how shallow I am. Ning Wanyue finally understood that these boxes contained the belongings of the young man's father. They were all books, poems, and paintings. Apart from a few land deeds, there were no other yellow or white objects. The cool breeze never stops, the fragrance of flowers fills the path, and the red clouds ripple for thousands of miles. The painting depicted a lotus in full bloom. The lotus leaves seemed to sway with the wind, and one could faintly smell a sweet fragrance. A graceful figure stood in the pavilion in the middle of the lake. She seemed to be looking at the person in the painting with a smile. Chapter 852. It was late spring in March, and the grass was long and the birds were flying. It was supposed to be a time of prosperity, but no one was enjoying the scenery. Shiba, Songzhou. Songzhou was originally one of the 33 counties in the 10 states of Zhongzhou. After the fall of Zhongzhou, there were endless disputes among the feudal lords. Songzhou had changed hands several times, and now it had a new master. Shiba was the largest city in Songzhou. At this time, the flames of war had just subsided, but inside and outside the city, there was still fear. Even the commoners could feel the tension in the air. There were a few commoners sitting in the tea house. They whispered to each other and spoke in a low voice, as if afraid of being heard by a third person. "Hey, have you heard? Our current one." The man in coarse gray hemp pointed to the top of his head, with some fear and disgust on his face. "Turns out to be from the Liu family of Heijin County. But didn't I hear that she started out as a bandit?" "The Liu family of Heijin? Never heard of it. The original gentry clan in Dongqing. Actually, they are not big families here, but at least they are stronger than bandits." As the two were whispering, there was a sneer from the side. They all looked over and saw that the person who spoke was a rough man. Judging by his clothes, he was also an ordinary person. "Your information is already outdated." The man drank the coarse tea and narrowed his eyes. There was a hint of mockery on his face as he said to the two, "The original defending general pushed the old man's father to the wall and forced him to retreat. What do you think the old man did? She actually said that she was born and raised by heaven and killed her old father in front of the battle. TSK, TSK, TSK. She died a quick death." When the people in the tea house heard this, they were so shocked that they looked around, afraid that there would be soldiers outside rushing in to arrest them. However, they were really curious and pestered the strong man to ask for details. The strong man was reserved for a while, then smiled and revealed the information he knew. The person he mentioned was the new master of Shiba, one of the feudal lords of the world, the Jiang family. As for her killing her father in front of the battle, it was even more interesting. The Jiang family's troops besieged Shiba for more than 2 months. The two sides fought several times, and Shiba's disadvantage became more and more obvious. Seeing that the city was about to be breached, the nobles in Shiba became more and more anxious. They'd heard of the rumors of the Jiang clan plundering like locusts. If the city was breached, then their savings would be lost. Many nobles chose to flee in secret. Only one family didn't leave. Instead, when they were drunk, they proudly claimed that they were the biological father of the lord of the Jiang clan outside the city. This was terrible. If the lord was worthy of her biological father and retreated, would she be worthy of the soldiers who had died in battle? Fu Wang did not expect his lord to be so decisive. She killed without hesitation. The two of them escorted the dozens of women in the carriage into the city to see Jiang Pingji. These women could prove that the lord was not Lu Shi's biological daughter. As long as this relationship was denied, there was naturally no crime of kill her father in front of the battlefield. "Raise your head," the cold voice was a little hoarse, adding a bit of magnetism. At first glance, it did not sound like a woman's voice. Gu Zhen knelt down shakily. When she heard the voice, she suppressed her fear and raised her head slightly, but she did not dare to look directly at the woman sitting at the head of the table. Who would have thought that the person who was regarded as a disgrace by the Liu family and humiliated by Liu Shi would one day become the most powerful feudal lord in the world? "Lady Gu Zhen, I invited you here to ask you some questions." Jiang Pingji, who was sitting at the head of the table, was about 27 or 28 years old. She had an imposing manner and was dignified without being angry. Gu Zhen was Liu Shi's legal wife. Unfortunately, she was old and frail, so Liu Shi never doted on her. The second branch of the Liu family fled to Songzhou to dominate. Liu Shi's lust was aroused again. He took in dozens of beautiful concubines and allowed his beloved concubines to humiliate his wife. Gu Zhen aged extremely quickly. Her hair was gray, and she looked like a lamp that had run out of oil. "Go ahead and ask, Lord Jiang." Gu Zhen's back was curled up. Her body was hunched, and she looked particularly pitiful. "You and I both know that although I'm registered under your name, I'm not your daughter." Jiang Pingji went straight to the point. Gu Zhen's face turned pale when she heard this. Jiang Pingji seemed to not see her reaction and said coldly, "My real birth mother, whose name is Gu Min, died from dystocia when she gave birth to me. After you were widowed for less than 2 years, you married Lu Shi with me. Am I right?" Gu Zhen was the illegitimate daughter of the Gu family in Langya. She was very inconspicuous. Gu Min was the legitimate daughter of the Gu family. Unfortunately, she was born with dementia and had never married in her life. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.